SuperMega is a comedy gaming channel with almost 1 million subscribers, run by Matt Watson and Ryan McGee. Over the past 2 years, the channel has found itself mired in endless controversy, from the $60,000 lawsuit against ex-employee Jackson Tucker to their feud with former members of Oni Plays. However, none would prove as devastating as those levied in July of 2023. That month, a cosplayer named Lex accused SuperMega's channel artist, Dawn, of SA. Matt and Ryan were named for mishandling the situation. This sparked enough backlash for a whole new wave of accusations to surface from former friends and employees. They ranged from cheating accusations to mocking a friend that passed away. It was enough to disillusion fans completely. Before long, SuperMega's audience had turned with an onslaught of memes and defiled merch spamming their Reddit. This was followed by Nick Is Not Green, a personal friend of Lex and a YouTuber with 700,000 of his own subscribers on 2 separate channels, totaling to 1.4 million followers, deciding to make a video repeating those allegations along with uncritically reading a Reddit post of claims one by one, treating it all as fact. These Reddit accusations, created by a former employee named Leighton Stollard, amounted to a history of racism, homophobia, transphobia, manipulation, workplace abuse and exploitation, and really just everything. All of this created enough backlash for SuperMega to lose 50,000 subscribers. It proved too much to handle, with Matt and Ryan ultimately deciding to discontinue the channel indefinitely. They uploaded 2 videos addressing the individual allegations separately. Since then, this case has not been reevaluated by any channel of their size. When claims are questioned by streamers like Destiny and myself, Nick called us Redditors.
There's too many Reddit debate bro dorks on this website trying to come after me every single day.
Well, I'm putting on my highly regarded Redditor hat to revisit the entire situation and explain to you all how Leighton, Ethan, Nick, Lex, Morgan, and Rav's stories about SuperMega are all full of shit. Let's go. Lex is a model from Nashville, Tennessee. Her account went viral last year, amassing well over 300,000 followers. That growth was due in large part to a series of viral photo shoots. In spite of this, her roots were as an artist with long-standing ties to the art community. One of those connections was Dawn, who she befriended in 2017. Dawn was already quite popular with a sizable presence on Newgrounds, but it paled in comparison to his fame after creating Cassette Girl that same year. The mascot grew to be so popular that she was set to appear in Friday Night Funkin'. Lex later claimed many of his characters, including Cassette Girl, were based on her. This is also around the same time that Dawn became a channel artist for SuperMega. Matt and Ryan would come to regard the artist as a good friend. Within a year, Dawn was invited to fly out from Germany to the United States. They filmed 2 drunk drawings and a podcast together, but he wouldn't return to the SuperMegaplex, their office, until 3 years later, in November of 2021. By then, Dawn and Lex were dating and in a committed relationship. To celebrate the completion of SuperMega's book, Matt invited the couple to LA. This marked the first time Lex and Dawn met in real life. They stayed at Matt's house and appeared on episode 273 of the SuperMega cast. Matt grew close with Lex during this visit and invited her out to LA several times. Eventually, Lex moved into the SuperMegaplex in June of 2022. This was all reflected on social media, as the friend group shared their collective hijinks. That consequently made it apparent when things fell apart. An early sign something was wrong was Dawn's quiet departure from the channel. Then, Lex and several others distanced themselves from SuperMega. There were clearly issues behind the scenes, but it wasn't apparent why. Those questions remained unanswered until July 27th, 2023. That day, Lex released a video calling out her ex, Dawn, and SuperMega themselves. It was accompanied with a condensed version of events for Twitter. For this section, I'm going to relay her major claims and revisit the details later. It's over 2 hours of information and difficult to summarize. Lex first accuses Dawn of sexual assault. She alleges that when they met in November of 2021, he physically forced her into giving him oral. This occurred on their first night together and caused her to shut down for the rest of the trip. The video doesn't clarify how long the trip was beyond relative dates. Lex posted a photo of her plane landing in Los Angeles on November 12th. This is presumably her first night there. Dawn leaves on November 27th. That means the trip lasted a total of 13 days, where she went along with whatever else he wanted, in her words.
I feel like when this happened, I was like, especially this particular situation, I was like, no, I don't want to. I don't want to do this. And he kept telling me like, just do it. And like multiple times while he was like trying to force my head down, and he's like way bigger than me. I don't know, I was really freaked out after that. So eventually he let me go, but I just kind of shut down and just went with like whatever else he wanted that night and like for the rest of the trip.
That includes an incident in which he allegedly choked her.
I remember after I like went with the other stuff he wanted to do, he like choked me on my windpipe. Like he was like trying to choke me in a sexy way, but he was like choking me, and I was like breathing like very audibly, like not well. And I think at this point I was too scared to like say anything, and I didn't think he would listen because he just didn't before. So at that point it was just easier to do whatever else he wanted instead of go through that again.
Lex says she didn't notify authorities for several reasons. Dawn wasn't a US citizen, and notifying authorities could have revealed Matt's address to the public, effectively doxing him. Lex also says she couldn't process what happened and cited 2 pieces of evidence as proof. The first is a piece of vent art from their second day together. Lex says she had no idea at the time why she was upset, before explaining she caught Dawn looking at a mutual friend's nudes that same day.
I was sitting next to Don on the couch talking to him. I asked him to look something up, and he pulls out his phone next to me. And the first Google result, past search result, before he like starts typing in too many words, is an artist sex worker's, like a mutual of ours, OnlyFans leak. She's kind of a similar build to me, so I'm like double hurt because my self-esteem has been destroyed the night I got there.
The second is an excerpt from her podcast appearance.
If I knew he was about to announce, or like not announce, or like casually mention that we were dating in a podcast, wouldn't I want him to mention that? Like of course I would, right? But instead, I interrupt him. Like, I just made a joke or something. I think I said, like, I'm gonna kill you. There's a part where Don just stops talking. And with this context, if you listen back to it, I think it makes sense.
You have all around, both of you guys do. Both of you guys have been staying with me at my house for the last week or so.
You know why?
Why?
Should we tell everyone? Because
I'm gonna kill him.
Is there a secret?
Regardless, Lex kept the incident with Dawn to herself as they both went back home. Their relationship fell apart after the trip. Lex felt unhappy and ignored. They rarely spoke one-on-one, and it took a lot of effort from her to get time with him. She calls these normal girlfriend things and describes feeling used.
I was thinking to myself all the time that I knew like he was just using me. And I feel like a 90-day person when I say this, but like either like for sex or a green card, or both. I just feel like I fit into his plan, and it's less so about me, but I just looked like a girl that he would like. I felt like a piece of me because I was just useful for like gaming and having sex with in person.
This led to an argument in January of 2022, which Lex shows in her video. It's worth pointing out none of this concerns the assault. They would end up reconciling and stream Minecraft together shortly after. They continued to date long distance until 6 months after the assault.
you look, take these. You can plant them.
Okay, thank you.
Lex visited LA again several times, such as in February to celebrate Matt's birthday. Throughout it all, Matt and Ryan were training to fight at the YouTuber boxing event Creator Clash. Naturally, that made the event important to SuperMega's circle. That April, Lex stayed at home to save up for the trip. Her plan was to meet up with friends and share an Airbnb together in Florida. It was booked with a YouTuber named Ethan is Online, an unnamed mutual artist, and Dawn. Lex claims that she already planned to break up with him. It was part of a plan to discuss the subject in person to ensure it was kept offline.
I didn't feel good, and I was pretty sure I knew why. So when I was planning on having him come to the Airbnb, my thought process was, if I could just talk to him in real life about this, there wouldn't be a need to do any of this. You just have to go so out of the way to like bump into each other that way, that so it's not something that's screenshotable, something that other people can like speculate or be like, that's fake, or I didn't want people doing that to me again.
Lex planned to wait until the very last day to confront him in private. However, on May 16th, that was jeopardized when Dawn told Ethan they were dating. Ethan asked Lex about this, forcing her to tell him the truth. And at this point, she confided in someone about the assault for the very first time.
We visited a couple beaches and stuff. Everybody's hanging out at the beach all day. On the way back, before we go get a hotel room, Dawn's like talking to Ethan and like mentions that we're dating. And so after that conversation, he comes over to me and he was like, you guys are dating? And my like stomach sank, because I was like, I gotta talk to you about this thing, because it's not normal to like have someone have to tell you that. And then I don't know, I've never been in that situation before, you know. I didn't expect to tell anyone besides Dawn. I mean, what was I gonna do, lie? It added a lot of anxiety that I didn't have because I hadn't gotten to process it. If you've ever been abused physically, sexually, telling someone else, like verbally, it makes it feel so much more real, that it can make you feel completely different than how you did before, and it's very jarring.
They were far from the Airbnb and forced to book a hotel. The conversation left her so uncomfortable that she hid in her car to avoid Dawn. Thankfully, Lex was able to spend the night with Ethan instead.
I stayed with Ethan that night, and the next morning, I have a picture there. That's me with my stuff, about to go drive back to Tampa.
They drove back the next morning and partied at their Airbnb. This took up the final day of their trip and continued into the early hours of May 18th. Once the guests left and everyone else was asleep, Lex took Dawn for a walk around the neighborhood. That's when she was finally able to confront him.
I was basically like, hey, do you remember November when we first hung out? And he was like, yeah. I basically asked him questions that necessitated him saying yes or no to, because I wanted it to be easy for me, and I wanted it to be easy for him because I didn't want it to take too long. I didn't think it needed to for me to tell him the way I was going to tell him. So I said, you remember the first night when you were like pushing my head down and I was telling you no? He like didn't dispute anything that I said. He was just saying yes. And I was like, you know that's sexual assault, right? Like, you can't do that to people. Like, that wasn't cool that you did that to me. I've been like really like messed up that you did that. I like have to like get better from this. It's making me not well. Like, basically explained to him all but like a baby that sexual assault is bad, and that what he did was that, and that you can't do it. Because all it takes, all it would have taken is for me to have been like, no, I don't want to, and for him to stop, but he didn't. So I say all this, and he says, so does that mean you're breaking up with me? And I was like, what? Yeah.
Lex went back to Tennessee, though not for long. Before the trip ended, she already had a ticket to hang out with Ethan in NorCal, but she also made plans to move to Los Angeles at a party the night of Creator Clash. There, she met Rav, a friend and associate of SuperMega. The rapper had just ended tour and had nowhere to crash. Lex offered a place at their Airbnb, which she took her up on. They talked a lot that night, both about life and their future plans. Rav was from the UK and had just gotten divorced. He planned on moving to the US in June and was going to stay at the SuperMegaplex, ending the trip with 2 separate invitations back to California. Lex says this was all done under the assumption that Don would return to Germany. However, Don never left the United States. He was now living with Matt, who flew him out after the event. This is when her view on how it should be handled starts to change.
Every time I'd look on my phone, I'd notice things were going on in LA. Like, why is Don in LA? I thought he was going back to Germany. Turns out Matt invited Don to stay with him after Creator Clash, after he was done staying in Florida and I think maybe somewhere else. It occurs to me that I'm gonna need to talk to more people about the Don thing, what happened with him, to give context to why I don't want to see him. Why would I ask my friend to make sure I don't see someone?
On May 25th, Lex booked her flight to Los Angeles. It was scheduled for June 14th, when she planned to move out a month later. With Dawn still there, she decided it was time to tell Matt and Ryan about the incident. That day, she messaged Ryan and asked to call. Lex states it was intentionally done over voice to not leave a trace. She claimed this is something that SuperMega took advantage of.
I purposely told both of them, I'm calling you because I don't want this in a text. I don't want this screenshotable. I don't want this to be a big thing. I at least want the choice to have that, and I get the choice if it's not drama. I didn't want that, and I told them that. I made that clear, and I feel like they took advantage of that fully.
Ryan seemed understanding and supportive, which came as a relief. Though he did ask for details, which she thought was weird.
I was getting asked about like how things happened and stuff, like very inquisitively, when I was on the phone with Ryan, and that was the one thing that I thought was weird, because if I believed someone, I wouldn't be asking that many questions. I'd just be like, I don't need graphic detail. It was a little weird.
Matt, on the other hand, didn't respond for 2 days, with the call with him said to have gone much worse. He grouped it in with their previous controversies, which she said felt dismissive. He was afraid of how it would reflect on their channel. This incompetence even led him to ask her about how they should move forward.
He just kept saying things. He was like, would it still bother you if we like still worked with him? And I started like being like, I don't know. That's not really my decision. I can't really tell you that, because that's not what I was calling for it. He's an online Twitter artist. I would see him regardless. It's not about that. It's about me not seeing him in person so I can like relax and like process stuff. That's when I had to realize they stopped being my friend, when I told them what happened. When Matt told me that SuperMega was his magnum opus after I told him I got assaulted.
Perhaps the most infamous is his remark that SuperMega was his magnum opus. This line is referenced throughout the video as a phrase he'd apparently repeat often.
He said, SuperMega's my magnum opus, and I would hate for something to mess it up. He said that multiple times. I remember I was sitting on like the curb of the parking lot of where I was staying at the time, outside, just like staring, because I never in a million years would have expected Matt, my friend Matt, to say something like that to me.
On May 30th, Matt and Ryan had a big talk with Don about the accusations. They ultimately let Don stay and concluded the two needed to make up. He even appeared on the SuperMega account a week later. Lex writes in her Twitter post, days later, they talked to Don privately at Matt's house. They proceeded to explain and try to get his side of the story. They left the conversation with Don saying he didn't know what he did wrong. Matt and Ryan decided for me that Don and I just needed to talk things out in person. It was so egregious that Lex decided she had to leave Northern California to confront them.
Before I got there, what made me decide that I needed to not stay in Modesto and I needed to like immediately go to LA was this. I felt them downplaying it in real time, but I was across the state, like 5 hours away, and could do nothing about it. So that's when I decided I needed to be there.
However, Matt would get fed up with Don for unrelated reasons, finding him difficult to live with. In a very short-sighted decision, Don was moved to the Super Megaplex, their office. Neither Don nor Lex were aware of each other's plans. The only person who was aware was Matt, who didn't notice until hours before she arrived. Because of this, Lex would end up at the Super Megaplex at the same time as Don, hiding from him in the bathroom.
I get there, and I don't think Don is there, and then I hear him. I hide in the bathroom, like after putting my shit up, because I didn't think he was there. I hid in the bathroom at the Super Megaplex, and I stayed in there with the door locked, scared shitless, until Don came up to the bathroom to try and use it, and I was in there. I had the door locked, so he tried turning it a few times and couldn't. And he knocked and he said, hello? And I didn't answer. I was too scared to say anything. I didn't even expect to see him ever again. I like hear him realize it's me. I'm sure he'd been told that I was gonna be there, but he says something twice. He's like, hello? And he's like, anybody in there? And then all of a sudden he stops trying and I hear him like inhale or exhale or something. And then he goes to the other bathroom. And then afterwards he got arrangements to leave very quickly, and I hadn't seen him since.
Don left, staying with other friends in the area. He was eventually able to fly back to Germany, where he was subsequently fired by SuperMega. This screenshot shows Don claiming to have been given no explanation. Ryan also continued interacting with his art on Twitter. The last message Don ever sent Lex is dated August 31st. It's a vague apology, which she claims was to not put the accusation in writing. That concludes most of the info in her story directly related to Don. The rest pertains to what occurred after moving to LA. This is how Lex starts the third page of her call-out post. During our time at the office, every action was held against us in silence until they felt appropriate to use them to kick us out. Lex moved into the Super Megaplex on June 14th, which also happened to be Ryan's birthday. Lex and Rav go to his party, but are put off when they realize everyone is there except Leighton. Leighton Stollard was an employee of SuperMega at the time. He was brought on in 2021 to handle their merchandise. Lex and Leighton became close friends shortly after he was hired. In fact, she actually spoke to him before Matt and Ryan about the incident.
I didn't feel comfortable, so I called Leighton first. I didn't know him nearly as long at all, but I feel like he had gone through or has gone through enough that him and I both like talked about that I know he would relate when I told him, or like understand and like believe me when I told him. Without a doubt, he's a friend to me. But I wanted to ask mainly about how do you think Matt and Ryan's gonna take it, basically. And no, I mean, he assured me that they're gonna take this, he was like, for 100%, they're gonna take this seriously, like definitely. There's no way they would wanna work with him after knowing that and all that kind of stuff. And so I was like, all right, I felt normal, you know what I mean? I felt like validated, I guess.
Leighton had always been on her side regarding Don, which she felt was indicative of why the others didn't like him.
From day one, Leighton has been on my side about the Don thing. He's never doubted me or never like asked me a weird question about it, like he didn't believe me or, you know, just stuff a friend does. But he was definitely the only one out of all of them that didn't have as many questions because he, like I said before, has had experience with abuse. So I think it made him less of a yes man, which was very inconvenient for them, especially with the bad behavior they were committing at the time. Leighton would have and had said things in our favor against theirs. and I think that upset them.
Now, Lex didn't realize he'd been specifically excluded from the party until after inviting him. The news was such a buzzkill that people began taking down decorations. Many began airing out their grievances, like a rumor that he shared their merch numbers with a competitor. Lex notes that from then on, Layton always knew something was up. This is an allusion to a controversy SuperMega fans were more than familiar with. In April of 2023, Layton attempted to call them out for homophobia. We'll discuss this in detail later on, but to make a long story short, his call out was very unsuccessful. Now, this shouldn't have to be said, but living in Los Angeles is very expensive. Their daily expenses were high, with hundreds of dollars spent on Uber alone. That made it difficult to continue house hunting, which slowed over time, much to Matt and Ryan's dismay. Lex says that instead of communicating this, her and Rav were iced out as SuperMega grew tired of their stay. She writes, "Any action that wasn't looking for a place or going to see one, also known as being faster to go away, was seen as bad, when no sense of urgency was placed upon us to begin with when we arrived." With that in mind, let's return to Lex's timeline. On July 4th, Lex prepared food for a cookout at the SuperMega office. This lasted the entire day until the only people left were Matt, Rav, and Jim Tropolis. Jim had only worked at SuperMega for about a month. He lived with Matt before being hired on to manage their social media. Lex states that around 10 or 11 p.m., Jim approached her because she appeared upset. That's when, while intoxicated, she told him about what was bothering her, Dawn. He appeared sympathetic, but eventually started flirting, which she says escalated to SA. Her description of this is as follows.
When he heard my story, he was like, "Man, I'm so sorry." And then proceeded to like start flirting with me like right after. This is when I realized, because I was doing most of the talking, that after I was done with the story and he started talking, like he started saying flirty things and like he started putting me in a headlock, that I was like, oh, he's drunk. And like pretty much right after I realized that, he started kissing me. If you've ever seen a picture of Jim, he's a really tall guy. It was not even in my brain to be like, get this guy off of me, or like, not get this guy off of me. Yes, I didn't want to kiss him. Because to me, this guy I am not that close friends with. Like, we are just from the same place. And like, I thought he wanted to like get to know me better. Listens to my sexual assault story and then makes out with me. Like, at this rate, I'm just kind of stun locked. I had no idea what he's doing. I don't know if there's even any other people in the place. I think there was 2 other people. I think Matt and Rav were still there. So he like gets up at some point after like putting me in a chokehold a few more times and kissing. He only kissed me a couple times, but he put me in a chokehold for a while and it was very uncomfortable.
This leads to a scenario in which Lex follows Jim into a closet.
He like gets up and then goes to the office and he's like, "Come here." I don't even remember thinking anything. I was literally just like confused. And because when he said that, he was in the office, but he was in the closet. And when I came over to him, because I was like, in my head, I'm thinking, why is this guy just went to the office closet? Like the office where like everybody has their computers and there's like a coat closet and you just go in there and stand in the doorway and give me a kiss again. Like I didn't even have like a reaction. I just didn't know what the fuck that was. And then after that, I was like, do you like me or something? Because I genuinely just so like, it came out of nowhere. Like I said, I just told him about being assaulted and he does this. And his answer is, I think you're cute. I still to this day can't the only thing I can do is be like, he was drunk, but why would you do that right after? Like...
Hours later, Lex went back to Matt's house with Matt and Jim. Jim immediately fell asleep, which allowed her to speak to Matt alone. This was the first time they spoke one-on-one since the phone call. This conversation takes place in the early hours of July 5th, which is important for later, so keep that in your noggin. Lex states they don't talk about Dawn at all, but instead her living situation. The topic had come up earlier in the night as Jim was looking for roommates.
This reminded me, the 4th, when I went to Matt's with Jim and Matt, Jim was offering me to stay at the place that they're gonna rent. And instead of it being me, I think they got tired of me because that was the only time I ever mentioned it, the night before, or the night that I also got offered a place to stay by myself.
Matt offered a place for Lex to stay by herself. The offer is approximated as a down payment plus several months, equivalent to at least $10,000. Lex wonders if this is a bribe.
But one thing that did come up was Matt offered to pay for me to live somewhere, like down payment plus several months, which if you're in LA, if you know anything about the housing market in LA, is an exorbitant amount of money. I immediately said no. At this point, I didn't fully distrust him. I just had a gut feeling that no one gives you that amount of money for no reason. without something to gain from it. It felt like a bribe. That's at least like, I don't know, the way he was saying it, that's at least like 10K. And like, regardless of how much it means to him or not, I didn't want it. I felt like weirded out that he did that. He was saying this so I could live alone in LA, like specifically apartment money for me to live alone. It was very weird.
On July 6th, Lex and Rav go back to Tennessee to celebrate her mother's birthday. It was meant to be brief until Rav's ex-wife attempted to take her own life. In need of a mental health break, they decide to take the long way back home. Lex buys a Jeep and they hit the road, only returning at the end of the month. That was when Rav was invited up to Washington by his co-rapper, Kill Bill. Given the long absence, SuperMega began to question their motivation to move out. On August 9th, Jim created a group chat with Matt, Lex, and Rav. Jim was instructed to handle the situation and led the conversation. He refers to their upcoming trip as a vacation and asks for an expected move-out date, meaning a date they would move out of the office. Rav questions the label, clarifying that it was a short-notice business trip.
At this point, this is they start calling them vacations. I felt as if like the things that I knew they saw on my timeline were clearly just being ignored because like I was obviously doing work. Even if you can't see Rav's music that he's making because it hasn't been released yet, I've been doing stuff. Every day on my timeline last year, you see me and I'm posting in a different state, getting like tens of thousands of likes, hundreds of thousands of likes. I'm not even trying to gloat.
Rav explains they hadn't found a place yet that ticked all the boxes. He assures them that once they return, they'll resume house hunting right away. But it becomes clear that SuperMega wanted them to leave. Rav writes in the last excerpt we're given, "But yeah, y'all have certainly gone above and beyond with your generosity in allowing us to crash for as long as y'all have, and we'd hate to overstay our welcome any further than we already have. All of our stuff should currently be in the garage." Lex and Rav leave California homeless as they move out of the Plex. They would end up getting robbed in Portland twice. Lex states this occurred the same day they left, but old tweets indicate it was actually August 12th. It was especially devastating as they brought much of their stuff with them.
They told us they wanted us gone before we left, so I took more stuff, and because I didn't want to, I felt so bad. I felt like trash that we were getting asked to leave somewhere. Like, that will never make someone feel good.
According to Lex, they received no concern or support from SuperMega. Rather, Lex says they were laughed at back at the office. Rav also referenced this publicly back in 2022. "I was just informed that some people I used to consider friends celebrated that Lex and I got robbed recently. So, that sucks." No source is given for this claim. In late August, Lex and Rav returned to LA. Lex states that at first they slept out of her Jeep. They then booked a hotel in Pasadena with a master bedroom and hot tub.
The first place we stayed outside of the Plex was like some rinky-dink hotel in Pasadena. It was like obviously like used for trafficking. Like, it was a giant master bedroom with a hot tub, and it had a corded phone with the cable cut. So we were there for like a week or two, paying, like, extending it day by day because we weren't finding places to stay. I think it had been a bit, and then we get no message, so we had to kind of decide to reach out. After everything, we had to reach out to them.
That's when they decided to confront SuperMega about their continued silence. It was always intended to be a confrontation. Lex admitted this herself. They resented being passed off onto Jim and felt maligned. Their mistake was telling Leighton, who informed Matt and Ryan ahead of time.
The event that happened that made them even aware that we were upset still was that we had talked to Leighton, and Leighton, he did not do this on purpose. He made the mistake of passing the word along, and I think he was trying to help because I think it's what he wanted too, because he would never, literally would never try and like get me in trouble over this after he has been like my rock the whole time outside of this whole situation.
On August 23rd, Rav created a new group chat over text with Lex, Matt, and Ryan. This argument unravels over the next 3 days with both sides explaining their grievances. It starts off friendly as Rav attempts to initiate a casual conversation. That changes after Ryan asks if they were still upset about Dawn. You see, Lex came to view their mishandling of Dawn as intrinsically linked to the fallout.
I refuse at that time to believe that now those stories are just intrinsically linked. I know that now, but it took me at least half a year to digest the fact that if I wanted to ever talk about it, I'd have to talk about both of them now, because they both refused to talk to me when I was staying at their workplace that they visited all the time, or even just text or like call to meet up. I think it took me a long time to realize it wasn't working because I couldn't understand the concept of being so disrespected by someone that you're friends with.
They did not seem to empathize with the circumstances that motivated Lex and Rav's decisions.
I never got to take a break. All the breaks I took was because I was burnt out and I was suicidal. You know how many times I wanted to like kill myself because of all this shit going on? I'm not to say that we're not adults here. We have self-autonomy, but everything I say has an explanation. Every action has a context that comes before it, that had a bad thing that happened before it that made me react the way it did.
She went so far as to state that they stopped being her friend after learning what happened.
I know they can't handle confrontation, but I guess I always expected them to at least just talk to me as a friend. But that's when I had to realize they stopped being my friend when I told them what happened.
There is validity to the stories being linked to some extent, but Lex implies a cover-up and is steadfast in declaring it all the same issue. I felt like I couldn't talk about what was going on with me for the past year because I'd have to explain things that Matt and Ryan clearly didn't want people to know.
It's only been one grievance. It was always the same grievance. It was the same thing that no one listened to me for, and when I tried to talk about it, no one wanted to talk about it. And now it's a problem, and I'm homeless, sitting in this creepy, weird trafficking room, getting told that, like, we're annoying, basically. That, like, we have too many grievances. I got assaulted, man. Could you guys just, like, care? Like, why'd you switch up? What happened to keeping him accountable, Ryan? Like, this year's been nothing but drama since the jump. For you, the fact that he can say, like, even bring up the Dawn situation, I had not talked about Dawn in typed words the whole time. So I remember when I wrote this, I was like, oh, so I could just show this to anyone now, right? Like, I could just show, he said it. It's real. Like, it's not just like some that I'm like saying in Insular and then there's no other proof of someone else. I remember feeling a weird amount of relief when he wrote that and sent it. I was like, you're so mad you like f***ed yourself in case like you wanted to ever keep this like fully like locked down forever.
Lex states that all she wanted was for them to make a public statement about Dawn.
When he told them that I was still upset, I don't think they got to hear why, because all I wanted was them to make a statement, at least just to say that Dawn doesn't work with them anymore, or they've split ways, or however you want to word that. That's such a loose-ended statement. You could be as vague as possible, or you could just straight up say, he assaulted someone. We're not working with him anymore. And then, like, imagine if they did that. I would have no burden of people believing me or not. Because if SuperMega said, hey, we're not working with this guy anymore, he assaulted someone, whether or not they named me or not, getting to, like, say without being scared that something bad is gonna happen to me, that I got assaulted and that, like, hey, I gotta take a break from work. I never got to do that.
That was, of course, while criticizing their arrangement to stay at the office.
They word stuff like, I have to feel like I owe them something. I don't owe them anything. They weren't charging me rent. They said I could stay there. You know, if he didn't like me there, he could have done a lot of different things. He could have just opened his mouth and talked to me. If you were a better manager and a boss, you would have had an end date for us. Like, that's why we left, because we weren't being told a day and we were so scared of how unpredictable these people were without trying to communicate with us that we're just gonna end up without, like, they're just gonna say, hey, you guys gotta go. How are we supposed to know?
The argument ends with a final message by Rav that Matt and Ryan never respond to. Lex went back to the office several times until the last of her stuff was gone. Lex wrote on Twitter that they couldn't get their belongings from the office because they weren't talking to us. Now, it's possible she's saying this because they lost their keys, but the only evidence of being ignored is due to Layton's incompetence. On August 31st, Lex attempted to coordinate with him to get her stuff. Layton didn't tell anyone, resulting in an awkward interaction with Matt. It's over a Ring camera, which Lex assumes was implemented against them.
While we were trying to go get our stuff, they decided that was a good idea to put a Ring camera in, so what? I guess we couldn't get our stuff? While we were extremely down bad and homeless, had no things. And when I'm there, trying to get a hold of someone because Jim isn't answering me, I checked my text a little late. Matt sent me this. Is this a friend to you?
Lex continued to visit and pick up Amazon packages from the office afterward, so it's unclear beyond this brief misunderstanding. Lex and Rav moved their stuff to a storage locker and stayed in an Airbnb in Hollywood until they can afford to go home. Lex drives back to Tennessee in October of 2022, which is when her timeline in the video ends. Lex subsequently blames Matt for her no longer being in LA.
You know what Matt did before Crater Clash? this year, he texted me, "How's Tennessee?" As if he's not the reason I'm there. And when I didn't respond, he took me off his Instagram close friends.
The video ends with her expressing relief that Dawn can no longer lie about the accusations privately. Lex's story was met with widespread support as SuperMega began trending. Her tweet received nearly 40,000 likes and her video 500,000 views. That was alongside the supporting statements corroborating her story. Rav's post received 11,000 likes in spite of a glaring contradiction early on. Rav claims that he was there the evening Lex called Matt and Ryan about the assault. This was when Matt, Ryan, and I first learned of the incident. Lex is very particular in specifying she informed Matt and Ryan separately, unless this is supposed to mean that he was eavesdropping, I guess. Leighton, meanwhile, used it to talk about his previous accusations. Obviously, I'm terrified of being sued, but I'd just like to say, you to anyone that thought I lied. To those that believed me and supported me, you have no idea how much you mean to me. Meanwhile, Ethan is online, also made a post to celebrate her bravery. My partner Lex is the bravest and strongest person I know, and I'm so unbelievably proud of her. Don made two statements in response to the allegations. The first was his recollection of November 2021. He characterizes the incident as a bedroom misunderstanding. The only instance he could think of was their third night together. Don asked Lex for oral multiple times after she declined. She finally agrees, but has a cold sore and tells him to be careful. He pushed down on her head, causing her to recoil. He profusely apologized, and then they went to bed. From his perspective, things were normal for the rest of the week. He wasn't even aware anything traumatizing took place until a year later. This is further defined in the second post, where he says that boundaries were clearly discussed otherwise. Don was still apologetic, though, and admits his actions were wrong, as no means no. Needless to say, it wasn't very well received, with most taking it as an admission of guilt. Don would end up losing over 16,000 followers as the public reached his consensus. He would end up leaving the site for good, moving exclusively to Patreon. With Don out of the limelight, the ire of the public turned towards SuperMega. They quickly became the focus, as Matt and Ryan's dirty laundry was aired out to the public. It may be tempting to excuse this as an unintentional consequence, but many of these claims were alluded to in her video, such as when Lex accuses Matt of cheating several times. If you'll recall, in July of 2022, Jim was looking for roommates. He would end up staying with a girl named Zeph, who appeared in their video at Anime Expo. Lex alleges that Matt had an affair with Zeph and cheated on his girlfriend of 4 years. He was able to get away with it by pretending to hang out with Jim.
To his ex-girlfriend looked like whenever he would go see her was just him hanging out with Jim. Matt's ex that knew Jim first got betrayed by Jim, and everybody pretty much knew, except for her, what was going on.
Lex also accuses Matt of cheating on Zeph with a sex worker, writing on screen that she talked to the other woman herself.
He also takes a break with the new girlfriend he's with to basically solicit a sex worker girl that he was into to come live in LA and move from like across the US before he decided that he wanted to go back to the girlfriend that he was just with. So if I were him, I would probably be reevaluating my life as well. I understood so much when I learned that, because if not for that, I wouldn't know what the he was doing the whole time. He was like, I'm busy. I don't want to talk. I'm doing stuff.
On July 28th, the woman in question identified herself as Morg Pie. Morgan is a popular Twitch streamer, OnlyFans model, and a viral adult video star. In fact, on the good old hub, she has over 400 million views and nearly 1 million subscribers. That day, she went live with the title, My Experience Speaking Out About Something. Morgan wanted something serious, while Matt saw it as a hookup. She claims Matt used her and elaborates on the cheating scandal.
Basically, what happened with me and Matt was he led me on severely. He basically used me for my body and then ghosted me. Really, with me, his only crimes were leading me on and, you know, being a cheater.
The issue is she doesn't seem entirely certain of its veracity. Her account is self-admittedly based on hearsay, as she avoids making a definitive statement.
From what I understand from the timeline of events, as far as I know, I mean, I don't know, maybe, I mean, Zeph, if you see this, if you're watching, I don't know if you care, but him and I started sexting August 3rd, and it was pretty consistent until I flew into LA September 8th. Lex said that him and Zeph were on a break when we hooked up, but then, of course, as soon as I get back to Texas from LA, they're in a relationship. It's very weird timing. Yeah, I don't know.
At one point, Morgan also reads a message from chat claiming Ryan's sex fans. She loudly gasps before affirming it's the current speculation.
Princess, do you have receipts? Who are you? Not yours to share. Ooh, shit. I didn't want to say it because I don't have receipts, but that is the current speculation.
In spite of the title, Morgan's stated intent was to signal boost other people's stories. It was her contribution toward a collective effort to expose Matt's toxicity. She claims to have spoken to a lot of people, implying there were more to come forward. This included Layton, who she's also very fond of. Morgan encourages him to make a video, claiming his story would destroy SuperMega.
I hope Layton makes a video because some of the stuff he's told me is actually fucked up and low-key, like, I don't want to say, but someone in there is using their platform for not cool things, and they need to be held accountable. I actually pissed at all the people who were mad at Layton. I'm glad he was able to say f you to everyone. Dude, honestly, I hope Layton can come out about his stuff, because if Layton makes a video, it is so over. If y'all think it's over now, if Layton comes out, it is so over. Or like the other person who apparently has things to say about Ryan.
And it's worth mentioning that both Lex and Layton appear in her chat. Lex was there the whole stream, while Layton shows up 2/3 of the way in. They discuss how much attention Lex is getting and how optimistic that is for Layton to speak out.
I'm just so glad that Lex's post and her video are getting the attention that they deserve. How many likes are you at, Lex? God damn, 35k likes on this. So this is getting around. Layton, you got to. Layton, some of the stuff that you've told me about SuperMega, definitely an NDA does not protect it.
Then she giddily imagines how Matt and Ryan will respond to the situation.
It will be very interesting to see how they respond to this. I can't wait. I feel like they won't address me at all, to be honest. I don't think Matt wants to touch that. He did not want anybody knowing that we did anything. He's definitely a liar and a cheater.
With how much importance is being placed on Layton's credibility, it's time to finally put him under focus. To understand Layton Stoller's importance, we have to go back to early 2023. On February 26th, SuperMega received backlash after their pop-up shop turned meet and greet started charging $100 per meeting. Layton took full responsibility and issued an apology the next day. Matt and Ryan had nothing to do with the event and how things went down. The merch is 100% my role, and they trusted us to run and plan an event. SuperMega retweeted this and also made an official post discussing the pop-up shop. On March 22nd, Layton announced that he was leaving SuperMega. He was given a positive farewell, which implied the decision to be mutual, but that was not the case, which became public shortly after Creator Clash 2. The event took place a month later on April 15th, 2023. Matt and Ryan make a cameo to sing the national anthem before kissing each other. This upset Layton, who began subtweeting the duo 2 days later. A phony gay kiss for the public isn't funny. Neither was or is all the homophobic shit said in private. He was called out for being vague, resulting in a post elaborating on his treatment. Layton claims to have been used as an excuse to make gay jokes. He felt pressured to go along with it in order to be liked. That changed following an incident in which they mocked a young fan. A young boy had apparently attempted to take his own life after being bullied for being gay. Layton decided to try and get him an autographed book as a gift, but Matt and Ryan didn't take it seriously, unsure of his loyalty. They cracked a few jokes, which led Layton to break down crying, as he'd been in the young boy's position before. This didn't stop their routine, with the jokes only stopping once he raised his voice. I'm completely terrified of talking about this publicly. My mental health hasn't been in a good place in a long time. I really don't want to cancel anyone, and I don't want to create drama. I just feel it's incredibly important to stand up for the gay community and call it homophobia. The post received quite some traction, garnering 250,000 views. The public was on his side, until SuperMega issued a response hours later. This is when Matt and Ryan revealed it hadn't been a mutual departure, and Layton was let go. Layton claimed to have been pressured into going along with their humor. They responded that it was all within an agreed upon boundary. They had several discussions with Layton to make sure he was comfortable around the office. Layton assured them that they were all on the same page regarding its satirical nature. He even made sarcastic comments about his sexuality, a staple part of his character. But the most egregious distortion of reality was regarding the young boy, who wasn't a fan of them at all. This is how they recount the story. A person close to Layton asked if we could sign a copy of our book to give to a young person who had attempted after being bullied for their sexuality. We of course agreed. We each signed our names and wanted to add a personal note so we inquired further. It turned out that the person was not familiar with SuperMega in the slightest. Layton claimed in his tweet that the person was a young fan, but we were told that they did not know who we were, but watched YouTube in general. We raised concern about the appropriateness of sending merchandise of our channel to someone in that situation, skeptical that it would come across as vain and self-insertive. These concerns were misread as jokes at the expense of the situation instead of legitimate worries. The statement ends with them admitting to immature humor, but denying that it had ever been used to mask actual bigotry. They received overwhelming support, garnering over 20,000 likes. Many fans were confused to as if Layton's misrepresentations were intentional. One user recalled that Layton had vented publicly shortly before the event. Layton was going to Creator Clash until they revoked his ticket after leaving SuperMega, after Layton bought plane tickets. He publicly talked about it and was clearly upset. With the accusations backfiring, 2 days later, Layton announced that he'd be taking a break from the internet. I didn't expect for the queer community and other fans to think I'm lying about something that hurt me so bad. I should have stayed silent about what had happened. Until I can properly fix this, I'll be distant. People left this controversy with a negative view of Layton. However, the endorsements and the apparent revelation he was under a non-disclosure agreement was enough to earn him a second chance with the fans. On July 28th, Layton went live on his Twitch channel to tell his SuperMega story. He conducts the stream in tears as he takes subs and runs ads throughout.
This sounds so fucking stupid to cry about, but like, they used to make comments at the office because they knew how bad their jokes were. If they would make comments that someday I was gonna come into the office and shoot up the place. That like fucking hurt. Like,
Layton addresses several previous controversies. For example, he claims to have been forced to make his pop-up shop apology and that he was merely a fall guy. He also retells the story of the free book signing. Yet, these pale in comparison to new details he shares about his experience. The workplace was said to be toxic due to their humor being much less savory behind the scenes. Layton first claims they use slurs around the office, describing a specific joke involving Chuck E. Cheese.
Matt and Ryan use the hard R. They use the N-word. I have, not just when they hint at it and call it Chuck E. Cheese's middle name and give it a new name. Those guys, yeah, they would use the N-word. I heard it every once in a while. I asked them, I said, is it the N-word? Like, word for word what I just said. I didn't actually use the N-word to confirm. I said, is it the N-word? And they like start laughing. And I knew it was. He would write the full word down on a sticky note, walk over to Justin's computer, and put it right across the top of Justin's computer in perfect eyesight while he's trying to edit. When Justin would see it and be like completely shocked that he just has that in front of his eyes, you know, Justin would obviously make like an awkward, like, oh my God, like, you know, like he'd make a response like that. And then Ryan would get the, you know, he got what he wanted from it. But every fucking time Ryan would look at me to see if I caught it, and he would always grab the sticky note, wad it up really quick, and he always got rid of it. They never stuck around. They always got rid of their evidence.
Layton is diagnosed with both borderline personality disorder and type 1 bipolar. Layton at the same time was drinking with them and not taking his medication.
I was telling these fuckers constantly about my BP1, my bipolar 1 and BPD, and my paranoia, and how I literally feel like every person in my fucking life hates me all the time. I experienced terrible trauma as a child due to alcoholism and drug use. Because of that, I can't be sober around drunk people. So it's either I get drunk with them or I go home. I can't be the sober one. He encouraged me to take my medication to help ease my paranoia, to calm me down, because I thought it was me.
It became so stressful that it pushed him to the point of ideation, blaming them for thoughts of self-harm.
My situation with SuperMega was so bizarre. It led me to the point of trying to take my life because I couldn't handle the stress that I was under. I want to use my platform to help prevent young people from trying to take their fucking lives because it's common. Like 50% of people with bipolar try to kill themselves, and then like 20% of people with bipolar 1, like I think are successful with it. And that's so fucking sad.
Even worse were alleged remarks at the expense of Daniel Kyer. Daniel was a childhood friend of Ryan who created a sketch channel with him in 2012. Matt joined Sendego in 2015, with the three bonding over having grown up in the same area. His addition was announced on August 10th in a video that also reveals they'll be moving in with Markiplier. It was a huge step in their careers, with the troupe releasing 7 new videos in the following month. Unfortunately, this all came to an abrupt halt because Daniel took his own life. On September 18th, Daniel Kyer passed away at the age of 21. His loss was felt publicly as those who knew him took the time to honor his memory. Ryan ended Sendego altogether and joined Matt on his channel before they created SuperMega in 2016. Layton claims that Matt and Ryan ridiculed self-harm and made several jokes using his death as a punchline.
You know, they dealt with Daniel, so like they could relate, but at the same time, they would make jokes about Daniel. They make comments like, you know, be like, I'm gonna go kill my, you know, like if someone makes a comment about someone dying or something being dead or anything like that, like, you know, like, I can't give you an exact like example, but you know, like one of the guys would just like yell off in the back and be like, oh, like Daniel, or like, you know, like such a clear fucking put down on something so sensitive, and they did it. And when they would do it, I would be like, I would say wow, or I would make a comment because it made me uncomfortable.
If anybody wants to know, I will say for sure in the 2.5 years or 2+ years that I was around those guys, I maybe heard about five very clear jokes making fun of Daniel where his side was the punchline of the joke. It was Daniel himself. That when Ryan left the room that day, that's whenever I knew that Ryan wasn't my friend and that Ryan was a fucking coward. I should have knew that all along because Matt and Ryan made jokes about Daniel killing himself, but I put it away and I let it slide somewhat because I was like, maybe that's how they handle this trauma.
That bullying, according to him, sometimes extended to sexual harassment. It was so upsetting that he had to write it down in order to read it out loud.
There's something that I wrote that I need to read word for word because it's hard for me to talk about. Here's what I wrote. Jokes and videos were okay because they were for the video, but certain things were not jokes and were literal harassment without my consent.
The earliest incident is alleged to have occurred in August of 2021 on his very first day as a full-time employee.
I get hired, I join the team officially, and then I'm walking down the hallway towards the kitchen, and Matt yells from the office in the back room that he might as well show me his dick and balls because I'm gonna see it anyways. So he goes, hey Leighton, and I turn around, but the dude's dick and balls are out, and then he puts them away, and I'm like, Matthew. And then like everybody laughs kind of stuff.
He then describes footage from their drunk Mario Kart video that is so extreme it could never be released.
They decide that they want to compare their assholes to each other, one at a time. Matt and Ryan decide to just pull their pants down right next to me while I just have to be sitting there on camera. They're literally like faces in each other's assholes making notes, like cause they're trying to do bits. Like they were pretending that, I think like Matt made a bit pretending that Ryan had like toilet paper on his ass, you know, like they just did that. And I was so fucking uncomfortable that night.
But the worst is said to have occurred after the recording of Drunk Drawing Simpsons.
When we did the Simpsons drunk drawing that night, we went to a bar and I was drunk as fuck. But at sorry, I'm so fucking uncomfortable right now. Okay, so we go to a bar this night. Yeah, we're just in this bar, we're getting blasted. And then at one point I go to the bathroom and I go into the stall and I close the door and I'm peeing. And the next thing that I know is that Matt's now entered my stall that I'm in, that I closed the door, and his camera is like put out in front. So he's like front facing, he's filming just my balls, he's filming me pee. I didn't know what to think of that. Now I know it's beyond harassment. It's fucking insane to think he would do it. Earlier in that night, he did it again. So the first time he did it was at the office and I was in the bathroom with the door closed peeing, and he just barged into the bathroom and then like took a picture. So I'm sure Matt on his phone has the picture of me painted as Ned Flanders pissing in the Super Megaplex.
In spite of it all, Leighton felt dependent on them financially and tried his best to put up with their jokes. It was in vain as they slowly disregarded him as their friend. The way Leighton describes it, however, feels a bit conspiratorial, to put it lightly.
I would get downplayed or ignored or talked over. I was given this like petty treatment, and then I'm sitting there thinking, these guys clearly fucking hate me because they're doing this to me every day. And then I ask them why they hate me and if they have issues, and they're like, we're good with our issues, we just need to communicate more. But yet they keep fucking doing this shit to me. Literally, these people in front of me would like, imagine like the people who you think are your best friends. Now imagine all of them in front of you making plans to hang out with each other after work all the fucking time and not inviting you. And it's not like I felt entitled, like I had to be involved.
but it literally felt like petty shit that they were making plans in front of me because they all knew that they were my only friends at the time.
Eventually, he learned from Justin that they were looking for any reason to fire him. He tried to explain some issues he had while working there and was shut down. They then explained that if he didn't sign an NDA, they wouldn't give him the severance check they owed him. SuperMega's attorney had apparently threatened Leighton with legal action for even discussing Matt and Ryan in private with friends because it violates his NDA.
There's 3,300 people in here. Thank you for listening to me. This has been the hardest fucking past year of my life. I didn't think I'd ever be able to talk about this stuff. I told my personal friends what Matt and Ryan did to me after I got fired, and I can't even vent about it to my personal friends because it got back to Matt and Ryan. So they tell their attorney to threaten me about the contract I signed. So their attorney tells me that I can't even talk about Matt and Ryan in private.
It's worth noting Leighton's claims didn't end towards mistreatment of himself. He took time to bring back up Lex, even reiterating the magnum opus line.
I took a picture with Don at Creator Clash last year with him having a nosebleed, and it's like me like putting my fist up and I was like, just kick Don's ass or something like that. But like, I had no fucking clue what he actually did in that moment, and now that tweet is so fucking funny to me because now like I've never actually like I genuinely mean that. I'm like I actually like now I'm just like, dude, I genuinely wish I would have known so I could have hit him. I fucking swore that like the next move was Don was fired. We would never talk to him again. We would do anything and everything so Lex knew that she was loved and that we don't tolerate any type of abuse. But the moment we talk about it as a company, Matt tells all of us that Lex's situation is going to just ruin our magnum opus. And when he used the word magnum opus, I was stoned and I laughed so fucking hard because I said, brother, you show your fucking balls to your best friend while you drive Truck Simulator. That's your magnum opus? I was like, that's what SuperMega's our magnum opus right now is fucking balls on Truck Sim. Sick. This victim, you know?
He criticizes them for requesting more details on the situation instead of immediately taking her side.
They shouldn't have asked her the story. They shouldn't have said, tell me how he abused you, because that's not fucking relevant. They should have supported her and protected her and helped her. They never cared. Matt and Ryan are just giant fucking assholes that only care about themselves and SuperMega and Matt's little pop star career. That's the only important thing.
In addition to the previous accusations of Matt's cheating and Ryan sexting fans, Leighton claims that SuperMega openly misgendered a trans person he dated behind their back.
Ryan McGee openly misgenders a trans person in his life that he cares very much about behind their back. I can't tell you how many times I would hear Ryan McGee say, I'm gonna go home to my boyfriend, or I'm gonna go f this guy. Matt would make the jokes too. This partner is such a sweet person. I didn't know them well. I don't think they ever liked me. So we just weren't ever close. But it broke my fucking heart because I would see this person and I knew they didn't know that the person that they like, literally their fucking partner, is misgendering them all the fucking time.
Leighton ended the stream by rating popular YouTube animator Meat Canyon. He then posted a tweet summarizing the situation as him being sexually abused and harassed. The stream was received extremely well, with the public finally behind his story. The entire fan base went into revolt as SuperMega began to rapidly lose subscribers, quickly sinking below 1 million. Several employees distanced themselves, and Matt was forced to end his tour prematurely. The subreddit was flooded with memes and photos of them destroying merch. This is when the final claims against SuperMega were levied. One of Ryan's supposed ex-girlfriends made a post accusing him of cheating on her. Then multiple fans came out with screenshots of Ryan sexting them. With all these accusations circulating, there was an intense pressure on SuperMega to respond. People began to make bingo cards attempting to predict their apology preemptively. Jim posted a response in which he apologizes, but states their only kiss was consensual.
So after we finished talking about Dawn, I just remember us talking about being from Tennessee and a bunch of other just random crap. And at that point, I really thought we were hitting it off. I distinctly remember saying, how hard is it to ask for consent? All you have to do is say, can I have a kiss? And then I said, can I have a kiss? And she said, yes.
The first thing people heard about Matt and Ryan's response wouldn't even come from them directly. Matt's girlfriend vented on her private account about the situation and said Matt could debunk everything. Ethan is online, got a hold of this and publicized it to call them out. Hey man, I saw your girlfriend post this on her private. Can't wait to see the response debunking everything instead of an apology. He says further, no one has any reason to lie. Everyone coming out is someone who at one point trusted and cared about these guys. It wasn't long after that the subject reached YouTube with the upload, SuperMega is full of horrible people. This is one of the most popular videos on the matter with over 700,000 views. It was uploaded by Nick is Not Green, a longtime friend of Lex and Ethan.
Today's video is going to be a little bit different than normal. It's not really about a drama or any like internet tomfoolery. It's actually a much more serious story that involves someone that I'm personally friends with, someone who goes by the name Lex or Lex Updog online. And she's also the partner of one of my very good friends, Ethan is online, and that's kind of how I first began learning about this situation.
Nick and Ethan are in a band together called Queef Jerky, which released an album the day after Lex went public. Now already that is blatantly a conflict of interest. His video is also filled with character attacks that detract from the overall point.
And if you don't remember Matt and Ryan, you might remember them from the first creator clash where they both had the shit beaten out of them. Multiple friends of his and people in his social circle have talked about how Matt has used this phrase when talking about his channel, despite the fact that it's really not something to be that proud of. Again, Jim being the freak who kissed Lex after she told him that she was sexually assaulted. Can I put a photo of him up on the screen? It's literally what he looks like.
That includes straight up reading insults off of Reddit.
A lot of people even came into the subreddit to roast Matt Watson's music career. One person said, there's one last thing I want to share before leaving the sub. I did not care for Matt Watson's music career. I'm pretty sure this is a Family Guy reference. Don is a groomer and a rapist. If you found out about that and didn't immediately cut him out of your life, you're just fucking evil. My favorite post right here says, apologist gets what he deserves. And it shows Matt getting the absolute beaten out of him. Let's just let it play a couple more times. We can keep watching it. I don't think anyone minds letting this loop on repeat. We could just let this go. If you want me to do this for the rest of the video, I could.
The main function of the video, according to Nick, is to boost Lex's story. In practice, this means summarizing all of the accusations outlined before. Nick presents these stories without any scrutiny or even the possibility that they could be false. That includes completely misrepresenting Don's side of events.
Lex confronted Don months later about how he assaulted her, and Don basically did not dispute any of what happened and replied to Lex saying that he did in fact experience the same thing.
In actuality, Don disputes many details from Lex's account. He views it as a single incident, which even if you don't believe him, clearly isn't the same thing. Nick also says that Matt and Ryan hid the assault and should be held responsible for letting any of this happen.
This is what he said. He said, hey guys, with what's being said right now, which is a very weird way to explain what happened, you hid the sexual assault of a friend of yours and kept the rapist around even though you knew that he sexually assaulted someone in your house. There are multiple texts from Ryan downplaying the severity of this situation, and I think him and Matt are both pretty despicable human beings for letting any of this happen.
While he plays a few short excerpts from Lex's video, his coverage of Morgan and Leighton is secondhand, using summaries written by random users. One of these includes the name of Matt's ex, which Nick reads out loud.
It at least seems like up to this point that Zeph and Matt both knowingly cheated on.
It ends with Nick promising to make a follow-up and point out the significance of their channel's downfall.
Yeah, that was a lot, right? This sucks. All I really want out of this video and out of this situation is for the victims in the story to be heard and to have a voice. Matt and Ryan didn't only drop the ball, but I don't even know what word I have to like explain what kind of people we are talking about here. These are people who have worked with a lot of the creators that you guys know and love. These are people who have had the power to have an audience that was as tight-knit as SuperMega's audience. They had a lot of people who had their back. Since then, SuperMega has actually fallen below 1 million subscribers on YouTube. They were just hovering above 1 million for a very long time because they weren't gaining many fans. They don't have it anymore.
The video received well over 700,000 views, while SuperMega lost about 55,000 subs from the drama. The next day, Ethan posted a screenshot of Matt's likes and accused him of intimidation for liking a Tony Soprano meme. Tough Guy over here was liking pics last night of Tony Soprano killing someone who ratted on him. Normal behavior for a guy who was knocked out in 20 seconds. Ethan and Lex later went live to celebrate SuperMega's downfall. Their descending sub count was put front and center as the couple read posts from disillusioned fans.
What happened with SuperMega? Listen, Nick made a video about it, but all you need to know is that they're bad. Go to their subreddit. There's plenty of information. Google SuperMega subreddit and go there now. Look at anything. Look at the first post. It's been trending all weekend. It's funny how fast everyone turned on SuperMega. Yeah, and I think that goes to show, right? Kind of self-fulfilling in a sense.
He even took the time to promote a song he released with Nick.
143K, it's basically just the song of the summer.
The situation appeared unchangeable, with the audience at large primed against whatever Matt and Ryan had to say. That made it all the more surprising when they responded the next day. Not only did they maintain a positive like-to-dislike ratio, but public opinion began to slowly shift against the accusers. Matt and Ryan published 2 separate responses addressing individual claims against them. Ryan's video is significantly shorter and limited in focus. Ryan explains they were hesitant to take action as they didn't expect that behavior from a friend. That was further complicated when Don told him his side of events. Ryan admitted the situation was mishandled and they should have cut ties immediately. He also confesses to cheating on his ex and sexting fans.
While technically these actions are between 2 consenting adults, it truly is pathetic and there's no excuse for it. It's clear that instead of being responsible with the SuperMega brand, I abused my position and my power for selfish self-indulgence. I'm not sorry because of how this is all affecting me in this current time. I'm sorry for how this has affected everyone that was within the vicinity of this situation. My ex, my friends, my family, my employees, and everyone in between who trusted me deserved a lot better.
Matt similarly apologizes and admits it was poorly handled. Optically, they're very careful not to dismiss Lex's story, and they mostly take fault, though Matt offers his perspective and additional context. His recounting begins on May 19th, 2022, shortly after the breakup. That day, Don called him in tears to explain that he and Lex had broken up.
He told me he was essentially stuck in Florida because he's from Germany and he had no money and didn't know what to do. And at this time, I didn't know any specifics of what had happened with the breakup. He mentioned to me that they had been distant and then ended up just breaking up. That was the extent of my knowledge on the split at the time.
Matt sympathized and bought him a one-way ticket to LA. He let Don crash at his house until he could find a way back to Germany. It wasn't until afterward that Rav informed him about the accusations. Nobody grasped how serious it was at first, which Matt shows in a screenshot dated May 23rd. This, once again, completely contradicts Rav's statement. The conversation took place 2 days before Ryan's phone call with Lex. That means they learned about the accusations earlier and at different times. It's unclear why Rav would even misrepresent this intentionally or not. Regardless, Matt and Ryan wouldn't realize the seriousness until speaking with her over the phone. Lex portrays Matt as callous and focused on SuperMega as a business. Matt concedes that he didn't handle the call well. He apologizes for placing the responsibility of Don's role with the company on the victim, but Matt denies making specific comments and points out he was supportive before and right after the call.
I ended the call by voicing complete support for Lex and telling her that Ryan and I were here for her and we would figure out what to do. In hindsight, the answer is obvious, and we should have acted immediately, but we didn't. For context, here are the text messages right before and right after that call, showing that I was supportive. I was not completely callous like it was made out to be.
Matt and Ryan confronted Don, who gave a much different perspective. With no clear consensus, they allowed him to stay, but urged him to talk things out with her. It wasn't long after that they grew sick of his shit. In this exchange, Matt and Rav called Don a man-child that they had to babysit. Eventually, it became too much, as he was kicked out and told to live at their office.
At the time, I also had 2 or 3 people staying with me on top of Don, and I felt really overwhelmed. I had a lot going on in my personal life at the time that was stressing me out, and I felt overwhelmed, and I sent Don to go stay with Rab at the office.
Matt accepts complete fault for the events of June 14th. He takes full responsibility for creating the situation, even if it was by accident.
I made a mistake where I forgot that I had previously told Lex that she could stay there, and I sent Don there to get out of my house. I never intended for them to come in contact with each other. As soon as I realized my mistake, I told Don he had to leave the office, and for a little more context, context, here is me having a discussion with Rav where I'm realizing my mistake. Bottom line is, Lex, I am sorry that I created that situation and put you in it.
Now, if you're keeping track and listening closely at home, Matt has conceded a lot. He admits they should have acted immediately, it was mishandled, and his mistake led a victim to face her abuser in person.
The bottom line is it took us longer than it should have, and I just want to extend the biggest apologies to Lex for making her feel like we did not care, like this was not a priority for us. I'm very sorry.
However, this is a far cry from the broader claim. Matt is explicit in stating they never covered up the assault or shielded Dawn from any consequence. Even with the delayed action, Dawn was fired in response to Lex's accusation. The only reason they didn't make a statement out of it was because Lex didn't want them to. It was out of respect for her privacy.
We never stated our reasoning for cutting contact with Dawn or removing him as the channel artist. Because Lex had not publicly talked about this and she expressed that she did not want this to be a thing that was public, we felt like it was not our place to address someone else's sexual assault and give that as the reasoning for removing contact with Dawn. We figured that as long as he was gone and we weren't working with him, that was our response. The last thing that we wanted was to bring attention to something that Lex did not want attention brought to.
Matt even claims that he warned a YouTuber who planned to start a show with Dawn about what happened. Rubber Ross affirmed this on a now deleted stream where he explains it occurred sometime after June 14th. The series was subsequently canceled and Ross cut all ties with Dawn.
I was the one who told Ross over the phone because Ross had a show with Dawn and I felt like he needed to know this.
Now this is where the timeline starts to differ heavily from her video. If you'll recall, Lex recounts a cookout they had on the 4th of July. It's the night Jim kisses her and Matt offers to help her get an apartment. The latter conversation took place at Matt's house in the early hours of July 5th. It was the first time they spoke one-on-one since the phone call. Lex states that to her knowledge, they didn't talk about Dawn.
After Jim fell asleep, it was just me and Matt, and this is like the first time we had gotten to talk one-on-one since the phone call that I made to him. So we catch up a little bit. To my knowledge, I don't think we talked about Dawn at all.
While Matt says the exact opposite, explaining that they finally had an in-depth conversation about Dawn.
Anyway, I'm gonna fast forward a little bit to July 4th. We had a party at the SuperMegaplex, and afterwards, Lex came over to my place to crash for the night. While we were in the living room after we got back, I was on one couch, she was on the other. We had a very in-depth conversation about the entire Dawn situation. At this point, I had had more time to reflect on it and kind of see where I had messed up and better understood what had actually taken place and how my response to that was poor. In this conversation, I sincerely apologized to Lex. I admitted where I was wrong and I took responsibility. I expressed remorse for how I had acted during the situation and she accepted my apology. This is why I ultimately found myself a bit confused as to why there's a notion that I have never addressed this with Lex, because I have.
This is an irreconcilable difference that changes the narrative drastically. If she already accepted his apology, why is she acting like it hasn't been addressed? It's difficult to believe she'd forget given the significance. Furthermore, why even clarify Dawn wasn't discussed at all? If we're to believe Matt, the simplest explanation possible is that her claiming he was never brought up was an outright lie, because if he's already apologized, her arguments later don't really make sense.
It's only been one grievance. It was always the same grievance. It was the same thing that no one listened to me for, and when I tried to talk about it, no one wanted to talk about it.
It would be a roadblock in arguing that the Dawn situation was intrinsically linked to her fallout with SuperMega.
I refuse at that time to believe that now those stories are just intrinsically linked. I know that now, but it took me at least half a year to digest the fact that if I wanted to ever talk about it, I'd have to talk about both of them now.
This leads us to the second claim, that SuperMega made Lex and Rav homeless. Matt explains that initially they were allowed to crash at the SuperMegaplex to get their feet off the ground. However, weeks soon turned into months of staying at the office. This led Matt and Ryan to grow unsure of how determined they were to move out. The tension rose until August 9th, when Jim created a group chat to ask about their vacation. This is the conversation in which Lex implies they were kicked out.
They told us they wanted us gone before we left, so I took more stuff, and because I didn't want to, I felt so bad. I felt like trash that we were getting asked to leave somewhere. Like, that will never make someone feel good.
Now, I say implies because it's not entirely clear what she's claiming at all. Lex is trying to attribute some blame to SuperMega, but isn't consistent even in her own video. Here's Lex claiming to have never been given an end date to move out.
So I suffered because of having to rush from knowing I was going to be asked.
instead of them just either giving me a date to leave by or asking me like, do you know when you can be gone by?
Then, here's Lex admitting they were previously given a deadline for August.
I remember there was a time frame of like the middle of August, but we had plans to be back by then. So if things had gone correctly, we get back from Seattle, grab our stuff, and we can peacefully off because we would have had time to plan it.
Matt's response is quite simple, as it stems from their own words. Lex scrolls through most of the chat with Jim, but stops halfway on a message from Rav. Matt was able to provide the full screenshot, including a portion not seen in her video. It proves that Lex and Rav voluntarily moved out on their own. And when we're back, what we can do is move all of said stuff into a proper storage space under lock and key somewhere away from the office, so as not to keep taking up y'all's space. We'll stop crashing at the office, so no worries on that front either. If y'all have other concerns, let me know. Thank you for letting us crash for mad long, and sorry for not getting out of y'all's hair sooner. The thing is, this excerpt wasn't even necessary to show that this was the case. Lex flat out admits that they left on their own several times.
We just offered ourselves to just leave because we had a feeling that it was going to happen anyway. I can only speak for myself, but the fear of being kicked out without a date was freaking me out because there's no date. No one was saying a date. No one was like, you got to be here by, or you got to be out here by then. If you were a better manager and a boss, you would have had an end date for us. Like, that's why we left, because we weren't being told a day and we were so scared of how unpredictable these people were without trying to communicate with us that we're just going to end up without, like, they're just going to say, hey, you guys got to go. How are we supposed to know?
I have to ask, what is unpredictable about this? Lex and Rav's stay was meant to be temporary. They were asked to leave by the middle of August. Instead, they decided to plan a road trip that month, which makes SuperMega unhappy because they were supposed to move out. In a similar vein, Lex wrote on Twitter, there was no sense of urgency placed upon us to begin with when we arrived. We ended up homeless as a result of them icing us out and refusing to communicate with us, even about crucial things like concerns about us living there or when they wanted us gone. We know that within the first 3 weeks, SuperMega was already trying to get her out of the office. Lex said that on July 4th, both Jim and Matt offered her a different place to stay. Matt was willing to pay, by her own estimations, $10,000 to get her an apartment.
Matt offered to pay for me to live somewhere, like down payment plus several months, which if you're in LA, if you know anything about the housing market in LA, is an exorbitant amount of money. I immediately said no. At this point, I didn't fully distrust him. I just had a gut feeling that no one gives you that amount of money for no reason without something to gain from it.
Lex had a lot to say about the living conditions at the Plex. It was apparently so dirty that it was a place you couldn't work.
I'm like brainstorming all the time on like what to do, and the easiest thing I can think of is just to not be at the office. The office is dirty. I'm often cleaning up maggot infested pizza boxes. I'm doing stuff that maids get paid to do on my free time that I'm not working, so I'm paying to do it technically.
However, Ryan goes on to blame Lex and Rav themselves for the mess and cited it as one of their grievances. Ryan says, don't you think the I won't tolerate being treated like a child is a little far-reaching? Y'all consistently left messes out in our fridge. Rotting food in the kitchen and fridge, bags of trash sitting out, etc. It's not about being treated like a child, it's about acting like an adult and respecting the place we were happy to lend you, which again is a place of work for 5 other people. Lex denies this before admitting she may have contributed.
I order food at like dinner time or later because I would stay up a lot when no one was around so I could enjoy being normal. Order late night food, fall asleep, take it out the next day. Or you know what? If it did sit, it sat with the piles of trash that were beyond anything I could ever make myself.
Meanwhile, Lex had so much stuff at the office it couldn't be carried out in one trip. In general, Lex comes across as rather ungrateful after living rent-free in LA for months.
I had so much stuff, I couldn't fit it all in one trip to go, so I had to drop off some of it at a storage unit. We really do care about you as friends, if that hasn't been obvious with the support we've consistently given you by letting us live somewhere that was full of trash and people and no room, and making us feel uncomfortable about it, and then making us feel uncomfortable about getting assaulted and then not talking to us while coming to work every day. And you know what Matt did before Crater Clash this year? He texted me, how's Tennessee? As if he's not the reason I'm there.
Lex wrote on Twitter that upon returning, they couldn't get their belongings because SuperMega wouldn't talk to them. There was at least a week where they didn't have access to the office.
There was a point in time we get into town, we just don't have access to the Plex. There's at least over a week of time where we have no stuff.
If you remember her own video, this is untrue. Remember, Lex was ordering items from Amazon and having them delivered to the Super Megaplex. Matt also shows 2 screenshots disproving this from September 4th and September 6th. With all this drama, it should be noted that after moving out, it seemed like things went back to normal. Matt and Rav made up months later and met again at Creator Clash 2. Lex and Matt continued to text and were on good terms.
Since last summer, I assumed that my relationship with Lex was much better. For example, here's several texts I received from Lex between November of last year and February of this year.
Good luck tonight, Matt. Heart emoji. I'm in Nashville, but I'd like to try to come to a show before tour is over. We should have a cookout when we're all back in town to celebrate. I said, thank you. We'll party hardy soon.
I thought that after I apologized to her last July, things had smoothed out, and I think you could see why I would think that.
But communication ceased shortly after they fired Leighton Stollard.
But that communication ceased around the time that we fired Leighton, who is a close friend of hers.
With his response to Lex out of the way, Matt discusses the other people who came forward.
Normally this is where I would end the video, but unfortunately there was a lot more that needs to be addressed. So I was just talking about personal details being unnecessarily mentioned and weaponized to make me look worse, and unfortunately more people have jumped on that bandwagon.
The first individual he calls attention to is Morgan. Matt revealed they sexted for exactly 1 night and only slept together twice. He was single at the time and in between relationships. Matt says he was honest about his intentions from the start. It was just a hookup and he wasn't looking for anything serious, which you would think a sex worker would understand. Morgan acknowledged this but ended up developing feelings for him. Matt already wasn't interested, but it especially didn't feel appropriate once he got with his girlfriend. Morgan didn't take this well. In her own stream, Morgan admits to crying over him for months and manipulating him into talking to her.
Like, I should have expected this. I should have expected it, but like, honestly, I cried for months over that guy. I was like, give me one of your shirts, you know what I mean? So on September 10th, he didn't really text me that much throughout the day, which, you know, whatever. But then I posted a picture of me wearing the shirt I took of his onto my personal Twitter, not like my big one, but my other one. And he texted me after ghosting me, after I asked him if he wanted to hang out again that night. He didn't respond to me asking if he wanted to hang out again. He responded with a screenshot of the post and was like, hey, can you take this down? Like, people have seen me in that shirt, like they know that shirt. Can you just take down this post? You know, after he bragged about hooking up with me to all his friends.
Matt rightfully points out that none of this needed to be made public. Morgan didn't just leak his private matters, but his ex and current girlfriend's identities, which was not known publicly until that stream.
Morgan said, I really appreciate that. I'm just a big baby, and when I open myself up like that to someone, it's because I'm really into them, contrary to what my profession may lead you to think. But I'm glad we could talk about this. I appreciate you talking about this with me, even though you aren't obligated to at all. I said, of course, I'm really glad we're talking about it too, because I didn't like feeling awkward or having a loose end. And she said, yeah, same. I respond with a cool sunglasses smiley face, and that was the last time we talked. So you could see why I was a bit surprised when Morgan went on stream and said what she said. Morgan not only brought my current girlfriend into the situation on stream without her consent, she also name dropped my girlfriend and revealed that we were in a relationship, which was not public information. I'm very private about my relationships, so this was a big blow. Morgan also brought my ex-girlfriend into the picture without her consent and has strongly hurt her because of this.
If that wasn't bad enough, much of what Morgan claimed about his relationships was wrong.
She wrongly stated that I had been having a multiple-month affair with my current girlfriend while I was dating my ex-girlfriend. She lied that we had been consistently sexting when we only sexted for 1 night in August, and I have all of our text messages to prove that. She also lied about not knowing who my current girlfriend was because she did know who that was and she used it as a segue to name drop her. She also falsely claimed that I was cheating on my current girlfriend, which is not true. And for transparency, on day 1 of me dating my girlfriend, I informed her that I had recently slept with Morgan, and she told me it was not an issue.
It all came as a shock, as just like before, Matt assumed they left on good terms. That's when a familiar face decided to reappear once again.
Following when I had that text conversation with Morgan in June where we smoothed things over, Morgan began hanging out with our ex-employee Leighton more, and I have not heard from her since that conversation until I saw her stream. Now, if you're wondering why I'm bringing up Leighton again, I'm going to explain.
Leighton's proximity to both Lex and Morgan wasn't coincidental. Matt first explains why Leighton was fired in March of 2023. They were unhappy with his performance, and his emotional outbursts caused problems at the office. Layton even recognized this, showing an exchange in which he offered to leave. I'm really sorry to both of you that I've caused so many internal and public issues. No one else is messing up as much as I am, and especially when there's only 6 of us, I'm sure it really shows. I 100% understand if you guys are ready for me to leave SuperMega and let someone else take care of my responsibilities. It's not fair to you that I keep screwing up.
So yes, as you can see, Layton was aware of his performance and the issues that were taking place with his job, and we were not looking for any reason to fire him. We did not want to fire him.
In spite of this, he set out on a vendetta after being fired.
Layton was extremely disgruntled that we fired him. He felt that it wasn't fair, and he felt like he needed to get even by taking away our platform. Layton would frequently slander myself and Ryan to fans on his Discord server. He even went as far as to join a fan's 18-year-old birthday drunken Twitter space to shit-talk us.
Layton claimed to have been silenced through a severance. That in order to get that severance, or a chunk of change that employees get when they leave a company, he was forced to sign a contract with a non-disparagement clause.
By the way, you guys, when Matt and Ryan fired me, they offered me 2 months severance in exchange for a contract to never talk about them. And because I'm an artist and I live in LA and I need money, I signed the goddamn contract. It was like, all right, there I go. Like, you guys now know in perpetuity that I can't say, it's the golden, like, it's called a non-disparagement. It means that if you can't say anything nice about them, you can't say anything at all. I am so fucking terrified that these guys are gonna sue me because I can't afford to legally represent myself. And that's why I've been so fucking scared to talk about these guys. They basically bragged to me that they didn't have to give me severance, but they felt like they were so good to me. Like, Matt and Ryan felt like they were blessing a poor person by handing them money, and but it's 2 months severance. Like, that's genuinely nothing. Like, I'm sorry, yeah, like, it's money, obviously, but 2 months severance is so up.
Matt completely recontextualizes this, explaining that Layton's position fell under at-will employment in California. This meant they were able to fire him at any time, for any reason, without severance. They felt bad, however, and contracted an employment attorney specifically for this arrangement, as severance is a legal matter. Layton was paid $12,000.
We gave Layton $12,000 in severance, which he admitted on stream he wasn't even supposed to get, technically, but was still offended that it was only $12,000. For reference, in California, a typical severance package consists of 1 week's pay for every year the employee was with the company. We gave Layton 2 months of pay and told him that he could dictate the narrative of his departure, that we would not tell people he was fired, and that we would always be here for him in any way that he might need.
Layton signed the agreement before storming out and blocking them on everything. It was concerning, especially given an incident that occurred months prior.
We were concerned at this point because in the months prior, someone who had been with Layton and a group of his friends told us that he had been flaunting that if things ever went south with us, he could just easily cancel us. We actually brought this up to Layton in a meeting that a reliable source had told us this. He swore that he never said that, and he swore that he would never do that. We were still wary after that because that actually wasn't the first time we had heard that from someone.
Their fears were realized when Layton accused them of homophobia after Creator Clash 2. Of course, Layton was unsuccessful in this call out, with most siding against him after their response. He took a brief break from the internet as he admonished the lack of support. This, as it turns out, was influenced by another factor behind the scenes. While working at SuperMega, he also accepted and held a full-time position at the company that fulfilled their merch.
So after Layton's call-out post and after we posted our response, he was advised by his employer that starting publicly with one of the company's bigger clients was a bad look and a horrible business decision. Layton made an agreement with his employer that he would not cause any further drama, but he was furious that he could not say more.
That's when days later, Matt was sent a series of anonymous screenshots on April 21st. It shows a Discord server dedicated to hating SuperMega, trying to find a way to get them canceled. The messages themselves read as follows. Layton works for a big merch company called Redacted, which he was working with while working for SuperMega, and when all the homophobia allegations came out, a big billionaire sponsor for Redacted told them that they needed to drop SuperMega as a client and fire Layton. Redacted refused to fire Layton and still kept SuperMega on as a client. If we can get SuperMega in enough hot water that sponsor wants to drop them again without getting Layton fired, then Layton can come out and say whatever he wants about them. We We just need a piece of gossip that's a big enough deal that a sponsor will want to drop SuperMega. Our friend Redacted is friends with 2Mad, and 2Mad hates Matt, so we might have some dirt on him. Most importantly, that Leighton wants to cancel SuperMega, but he needs someone else to come forward first. Another thing is that Leighton somehow has one of Marvelous' screenshots of her conversation with Ryan, and was thinking about using that as leverage to cancel them, but it's not enough. And Redacted, of course, he needs your permission first. Would you be willing to come forward, even anonymously, with your experiences with Ryan? If true, this shows Leighton is in contact with the server, wants to cancel SuperMega, but must piggyback off of other stories to do so. Well, Matt knew it was real immediately because it described the exact situation Leighton was in with his employer.
These screenshots detailed the exact situation Leighton was in with his employer. That's how I knew that they were real, because I knew about this agreement, as well as a plan to get other people to speak out against us, so Leighton would then be free to cancel us himself. This stuff was creeping us out. He was obsessed with us and wouldn't leave us alone. And at this point, we were fully expecting more of Leighton's close friends to eventually speak out about us for one reason or another.
And sure enough, after Lex came forward, Leighton was quick to air out his grievances. I mean, that much is evident by how bad faith his callouts were. While Leighton claimed to have been offended, Matt was able to show it was retroactive. Leighton not only encouraged the jokes he had a problem with, but participated in them. He flat out tells Matt it's okay to make those jokes, which Matt shows as proof.
His tone changed completely the moment he was fired, and as proof of that, here are screenshots from several occasions where I made sure Leighton was comfortable with these types of jokes, to which he always replied yes, and even in one message said it would be weird if we stopped.
Retroactive offense is common throughout Leighton's story. Leighton describes several scenarios in which he was sexually harassed. Matt explains it was part of the Jackass-style humor present on the channel. That's also apparent when the stories are placed in context. Leighton talks about filming him in the bathroom twice. This was after recording Drunk Drawing, when they hit the bars in costume. Matt and Leighton were dressed as Bart Simpson and Ned Flanders, respectively. The joke is that Matt got a video of Ned Flanders peeing. Not only did Leighton never express being uncomfortable with these bits, but he was once again an active participant. Matt shows a podcast from December of 2022 in which Leighton shows up unannounced to flash his genitals.
Late 20s, Chuck. Hey, Leighton.
Hey. Whoa.
Somebody's putting on.
Do you see his balls?
Leighton, you want to come take a seat?
Do you see his balls? I don't think it's appropriate for the podcast.
Well,
you want to wrap yourself in a towel.
That is a three-hander. That is a three-hander.
Goddamn,
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
This went both ways. Leighton criticized SuperMega, complaining about Lex and Rav at the office. Matt provides screenshots to show Leighton was just as frustrated as they were at the time. Earlier, we saw Morgan speaking out on situations that she was only aware of from rumors, and yet she uncritically repeated them and has yet to retract it to this day. Well, she was far from the only culprit. Leighton had to issue a retraction for his claim that Ryan misgendered his partner. That's because he never actually talked to the partner in question and simply made a guess before broadcasting it publicly. If you don't believe me, listen to his own words. During my stream, I told a story of how I felt my ex-bosses misgender someone behind their back at the office. I had no idea that this person identifies as gender fluid. It wasn't my place to assume someone's gender and pronouns. I should have checked with this person before I spoke to easily clarify their feelings. And the great irony of all of this is that Leighton's initial accusation was of misgendering, and in the process, he misgendered that person. My head is spinning a little bit, not gonna lie. Many of those involved had their personal lives dragged into the public without their consent.
I don't think it was appropriate or necessary to drag both my current girlfriend and my ex-girlfriends into the line of fire. They are both being harassed viciously, and their personal lives are being used as weapons to make me look worse, and I think that's completely unacceptable.
But as you may have noticed by now, we've so far neglected the most egregious example. Daniel Kyer is a name that should have never come up in this drama. As Matt and Ryan's best friend, it's obviously extremely traumatizing to them that the birth of SuperMega came just after that best friend took his own life. Even presuming Matt and Ryan had made jokes about his passing, they're the only ones involved in this that actually knew him. It's no one's place to judge the appropriate way to respond to such an event. People often cope using dark humor, and it's not surprising part of that complicated reaction can include anger. To weaponize that in pursuit of a petty vendetta is nothing short of sociopathic. Matt and Ryan were forced to acknowledge this deeply traumatic loss as a part of a smear campaign. I'm going to let them speak on Daniel for themselves.
That experience affected me and Ryan more than anything has ever affected us in our lives, and it's something that we're still recovering from. And if you've dealt with suicide, you know that grief is different for each person, and you know that there are a lot of complex and confusing emotions that come with the grief regarding suicide.
Recently on a live stream, it was mentioned that I would regularly bring up Daniel's side in a disrespectful and callous manner. Before I go further, I would like to go into who Daniel was to me, so those who don't know don't lack context. Daniel and I met in high school and became good friends, and we moved into the college years becoming best friends. I would tell him that even though he was younger than I was, he always felt like an older brother. He just had that intelligence about him. He was a very smart guy. He was very talented. We ended up collaborating to create the channel Syndigo, and we eventually moved out to LA in February of 2015. Daniel and I got an apartment together, but then eventually moved into a house with both Matt and Mark. On September 16th, 2015, while Matt was in South Carolina and Mark was at work, I found Daniel unresponsive in his room due to an apparent suicide attempt. He was taken off of life support on September 18th of 2015. To address these allegations head on about me making fun of the side of my best friend, I just want to state that it's just untrue. The person making these claims never knew Daniel. They definitely were not a part of the group that experienced the trauma of losing him, and I think honestly it is disrespectful to bring him up as a weapon. I felt like he was just brought into the situation for drama's sake to try to hurt me or Matt or hurt our image. I have done enough to tarnish my image, but I will not stand by and let someone talk lies about the way I talked or treated my trauma in regards to Daniel. The sole focus of all of this should have been about the support that Lex needed and about how we mishandled the situation. All of the attention should have been on Lex. Why Daniel was brought into it, I have no idea. I just wish personally he was left out of this completely.
It felt bizarre that the backlash moved so quickly from Dawn to SuperMega in spite of the initial accusations. I mean, by the end of it, Dawn was hardly even the focus. It was Matt and Ryan. Well, as it turns out, the person to blame for that shift in conversation was Lex. Lex was actually the first to publicly accuse them of mocking Daniel in her video. In fact, she went so far as to say they didn't care about what happened.
I don't think they relate to anything bad that we've been through. And the one thing they could, which was Rav's partner attempting to take themselves, was Daniel, their friend Daniel. Matt's at least twice in front of me, separate times we'll hang out with him, has called Daniel a coward. So no, they don't care about suicide. They don't give a shit about suicide. They only give a shit about themselves and who they can make jokes of that are under them that they can get away with.
I need to highlight something here that no one really questioned at the time. Lex is claiming that Matt and Ryan can't relate to anything they've been through and don't care about what happened. This is in contrast to Rav's ex-wife who attempted recently. You know, Rav's ex-wife from the United Kingdom who she has never met. These are clearly incomparable positions, and I don't know why Lex thinks that she can even lecture them on this. Now, Matt does bring this up as one of his criticisms against her, but he claims to have never spoken to her about Daniel at all.
The first thing is that in her video, Lex accused me of calling my friend Daniel, who passed away from suicide in 2015, a coward on multiple occasions. This really hurt to hear because this is simply untrue. I have no recollection of ever opening up to Lex about my friend's suicide. And if I ever did open up to her about it, I know that I would never have referred to him in the manner that she portrayed. And if I ever expressed that to Lex, which again, I firmly believe that I did not, if that's the case, then I find it wildly inappropriate that Lex would use something I said in a very vulnerable state to weaponize and to make me look worse.
Matt's second point is that Lex was also the first to divulge his personal life. That was, of course, while being just as ill-informed as the others.
The second thing is that Lex brought up personal details about my personal relationships and sex life. There was absolutely nothing that warranted divulging that information. It had nothing to do with the main point of the video, and it dragged people into the situation that did not consent to having their story told to hundreds of thousands of people, and now they are hurting because of that.
These are far from the only examples of dubious claims in Lex's videos, but Matt is careful not to discredit Lex. He defends her decision to come forward and writes her out of the conspiracy.
Now, I want to make something very clear. I am not downplaying Lex's situation with Dawn or her coming forward with that. I am in no way saying that her coming forward with the Dawn situation is a ploy by Leighton to get us canceled. I think it's very brave that Lex came forward, and I am not contributing that to Leighton. That was poorly handled by me and Ryan, and we take full responsibility.
And this is where I'm going to have to disagree with Matt, because there is an overwhelming amount of evidence that Lex came forward as a part of a broader plan. That's because it's something those involved would admit to themselves. In this clip, Morgan explicitly states that Lex's story had to come out first because it was the worst.
That was my thought, like, before any of this actually came out, and I like heard about it, and I heard that Lex was planning on coming out. I was like, I will just keep saying it over and over. Lex's situation was, I mean, it had to be the catalyst to all this because it was the worst. I hope that more people come out about their experiences with them.
Here's what she had to say in response to a comment on Reddit.
Oh God. Oh, please don't link comments from the subreddit. I don't really care. I really don't care what they're saying about me. If you guys missed it, someone was quoting what I assume is a Reddit post, and they're like, I'm distracting from the real conversation. Bro, people need to come out against them. And Lex literally mentioned me in her video, so Lex is in my chat supporting me. Like, we're all supporting each other. Nothing is getting watered down.
Now that it's been decisively shown that Leighton has no credibility whatsoever, let's look back at Lex's original video. Lex says nothing but praise for Leighton as she goes out of her way to vouch for his character. When no one comes to her birthday, she remarks that they're both people who don't get approval.
Neither of us knew that, like, the word around the block was like Leighton. Like, he was our friend. We hung out with him all the time. He was a cool guy. I couldn't even like fathom not liking him. My birthday was a couple days after, and pretty much no one came to it. Nothing against anyone, really. It's when I started to realize that things were weird, more weird. Only Jim and Rav were there. Rav I was living with. Jim was there after work, and I think he came along with us when we went out to dinner that night. And then someone else's birthday was like 2 days later, and everyone was there. But he's like somebody that gets like approval. He's not like Leighton, you know?
Lex claimed that Matt and Ryan hid the assault, but never actually explains how they covered it up. That is, except for a clip at the very end, which is quite damning. Lex outright states that Leighton's non-disparagement agreement was to prevent her story from coming out.
I mean, there's a reason why they made Leighton sign it when they fired him, so we couldn't talk about this that I'm talking about right now.
Lex's audio is edited out here to clarify that she meant to say a non-disparagement agreement. But given that this is a mistake that Morgan makes as well, it leads one to wonder who left them under that impression.
Leighton, you got to. Leighton, some of the stuff that you've told me about SuperMega, an NDA does not protect it.
Following SuperMega's responses, public opinion partially shifted in favor of Matt and Ryan. It was a strong defense that added context while also taking accountability. That was also helped by the fact that Leighton had to immediately issue a retraction for one of his claims. He never spoke further on the situation and eventually deleted his account. Morgan issued a statement claiming to have not lied about anything and that others had similar experiences. However, Morgan also states that she only went live because of her brief reference in the video. I messaged Matt first trying to get closure, but when I heard what happened with Lex, with her briefly talking about my situation in her video, I wanted to talk about my experience too. It's already been shown that Lex and Morgan talked to each other beforehand. They share the same unsubstantiated rumors about Matt's personal life. The idea she wasn't aware that she'd be mentioned until it came out is unlikely, to put it lightly. Morgan, unlike Matt, also doesn't show any of their messages. Her response was received poorly and largely dismissed. Lex liked an inflammatory tweet defending Leighton. I knew SuperMega and their fans would turn Leighton into a disgruntled, jealous ex-employee, ignoring all the serious claims he made and focusing on his petty comments. This continued into the SuperMega Discord, where she ran damage control for him. Lex reveals she had encouraged Leighton to speak out in the first place back in April. Lex says, I'm going to clear his name now. I was the one who said Leighton should talk when he did originally. He was confused on whether or not he should, and I was driving back from Creator Clash. He asked me if I should talk about getting discriminated against, etc. I said he should, and that's why he did. Then she downplays his actions and brings up the fact that he has BPD. He went a bit too hard on the stream. I was watching the Barbie movie and couldn't be like, hey yo, chill in the chat or anything. He's grown, but he's upset and manic with BPD, and his life has been crazy after getting fired, so I don't blame him for being upset. She did end up confronting him afterward, which led him to leave social media. Lex, it's just a thing he's gonna have to deal with. I got mad at him and told him, and he instantly apologized and deleted his social apps, so he won't be talking anymore for now. He's respecting my wishes, which is all I really need right now. Following this, Lex made a tweet about how happy she was that she went public. She claims to have emotions for the first time in over a year. It was to be her final official statement on the subject, never acknowledging any of the contradictions that Matt and Ryan brought up in their own videos. Rav, meanwhile, went live shortly after.
Dude, I need to smoke so bad. Oh my fucking God.
He excuses Layton's behavior based on his BPD and compares Ryan to Harvey Weinstein.
It was an important moment, but also it was a little messy from where I stand. And again, I love Layton, but it was a little messy. However, I implore that everyone takes a step back, takes a deep breath, and reminds themselves, Layton has BPD. This is gonna sound really fucked up. I'm not comparing them one-to-one. This is gonna sound fucked up, but it is in my view that this is how we get people like Weinstein over time.
Both Lex and Morgan appear in chat to call SuperMega liars. Lex even offers a preemptive defense for Rav, as he has unmedicated ADHD. Now, I think this is where you can tell things are really starting to fall apart. Lex has said repeatedly that she's been dissociating and brain broken.
I like to call it brain broken, but I try not to joke about it too much because I don't think it's like healthy. My brain's broken, so it's making it harder to think about it just in general. Not that that's an excuse, it just is just the facts of like what is going on with me at that time. We can wrap this up from here, I think. There's only so much I can talk about my brain being broken, and I've been doing it for 5 hours. I think I'm running a marathon right now.
Lex says in this message that she was brain broken because she was homeless or something. If anyone can make sense of this, literally anyone, feel free to let me know. Lex and Rav's homelessness is the second most important claim in her video. It takes up half of her recount, and it left her in emotional turmoil. Her claim is that upon returning to LA from Washington, they were homeless, but she never actually says when she came back or how long that period of time actually was. The closest we can get is this vague approximation of at least a week.
There's a point in time we get into town, we just don't have access to the Plex. There's at least over a week of time where we have no stuff.
Lex states that upon returning, they had nowhere to stay. They sleep next to the ocean before staying at a hotel in Pasadena. Then, after not being contacted, they confront Matt and Ryan over text.
We were there for like a week or two, extending it day by day because we weren't finding places to stay. I think it had been a bit, and then we get no message, so we had to kind of decide to reach out. After everything, we had to reach out to them.
Lex shows screenshots of this conversation, which began on August 23rd. Rav says in the first message they returned the day before and were now in Pasadena. That means Lex and Rav came back to LA on August 22nd and got a hotel the next day. This implies they only spent one night in LA without a roof over their head, to sleep in her Jeep next to the ocean. Now, Lex explicitly claims SuperMega made her homeless.
When someone is treating me actively different all the time in front of me, my only friends in LA that my only plan of staying somewhere, my only safe place, didn't want to help me, said they did nothing but helped me, and then gaslit me about it and made me homeless. Cause sure, maybe saying made me homeless is maybe extreme, but one, how else would you say that? Two, we could have talked. Literally all we had to do was do this.
But by September 6th, Lex and Rav leave Pasadena for an Airbnb in Hollywood. They stay there until October when she drives back to Tennessee, her actual home.
After September, I kind of get out of LA for a while. I lost my wallet around this time, and it never arrived before the Airbnb was up. So I just didn't have any choice but to drive back home, which is fine, but because at least I had time to plan it. But that was interesting. I had to drive from LA to Nashville. It's 2,000 something miles with no ID. So that was fun.
I'm going to point out the obvious here. If you can drive back home at any point, how exactly are you homeless? It seems like a choice if they were able to spend that much money on a hotel and an Airbnb. Now this brings up an issue that I've yet to address at length. Lex is very ambiguous when it comes to specific time frames. Just take one example. Let's try to figure out how long they stayed in Washington. Lex and Rav began driving to Seattle on August 10th. Even the first detail about this trip is inconsistent. Lex says in her video they got robbed the same day. That contradicts what she herself says in her Twitter post. We were robbed on the way out of and back from LA. There are now 3 different versions of the same event. To some, it may not seem significant she mistook the date by 2 days, but think about how many different screenshots are in her video. This is a public tweet that can be found extremely easily. Instead, Lex claims it occurred right after they spoke to SuperMega. She claims that in spite of having a conversation the day before, SuperMega ignored the fact they got robbed. They returned to LA by August 22nd. If there was any doubt before, this should prove they were never actually homeless. Their trip to Washington lasted only 13 days. The latest we can place them in Seattle is August 17th. The longest they could have been in LA without a roof over their head is 5 days. That is without accounting for the actual drive, which takes up an entire day. And also without addressing Rav's message that they immediately got a hotel. Now let's put into perspective why SuperMega came to view their road trip as a vacation. The issues seem to arrive from the extended drive they took in July. Lex actually publicized their adventure at the time on social media. They even shared a Spotify playlist for fans to enjoy. This is a map she made of their travels from the past month. We can use this to determine how long they were absent from the Super Megaplex, the office. Lex traveled back to Nashville on July 6th and definitively returned on July 28th. This means Lex and Rav spent 22 of the 28 days in July out of state. Not only that, but they were far from being in a position to be planning another trip. Lex already put a down payment on the Jeep. The Jeep broke down shortly after their return and cost $4,000 to repair. They were forced to ride share, only for Rav to lose his phone and debit card in an Uber. He gets a new phone on August 7th. That day, Rav also regains access to his bank account. They were clearly in a poor financial situation, partially due to their own actions. Yet rather than wait, they immediately began planning another road trip, you know, after already being asked to leave by mid-August. It's not hard to see why Matt and Ryan became frustrated. In fact, I'm willing to bet that most people would in this situation. Lex and Rav were extremely ungrateful. They were given a place to stay in LA for free for 3 months. Instead of being appreciative at being afforded all of that, they twisted it into a completely misaligned reality that SuperMega made them homeless. The last major question regarding Lex's homelessness is why she went to LA in the first place. If she was so terrified of seeing Dawn in person, why didn't she just stay with Ethan in Modesto? Rav is someone she's known to this point for less than a month. Well, from her own words, it was to stop Matt and Ryan from downplaying Dawn in real time.
Before I got there, what made me decide that I needed to not stay in Modesto and I needed to like immediately go to LA was every action from them was masked as disciplinary, but it was more like scolding. Like you're just like, man, you can't do that. That's really a big no-no. I don't know. I felt them downplaying it in real time, but I was across the state, like 5 hours away, and could do nothing about it. So that's when I decided I needed to be there.
So she's going to do what exactly? Confront him? I don't understand. What was the point? Lex and Dawn were on the SuperMega cast in November of 2021. That is when Lex first brought up her plan to move to LA, but this time it was for weed.
I just wish, maybe it would be better if, Justin could move out here, y'all could move out here, so people could actually be here and we could all hang out.
I'm planning on next year, so yeah, you'll see more of me. And Ryan and I are weed addicts, so we smoke bongs, we hit weed.
You guys be puffing that shit.
We puff dank. That's another reason why I gotta get out here, because it's kind of lame over there on the east side. There's you can't.
Nothing. Yeah.
Well, what is that? But you're not allowed to.
It also doesn't make sense because Lex booked her ticket on May 25th. Matt and Ryan had their big talk with Dawn on May 30th. It is literally impossible for that to have influenced her decision. I mentioned before that Lex went back to Tennessee in October. Well, she was actually back in LA less than 2 months later. On December 17th, Lex told Matt that she now lived 5 minutes away. Lex wanted to be in LA so badly that she chose to ignore the fact that Dawn was in the area. Matt still messed up by not telling her he was living at the office, no doubt, but was her plan just to hang out in the same social circle, in the same city, but somehow ignore him at all times? It really doesn't make any sense.
I'm not to say that we're not adults here. We have self-autonomy, but everything I say has an explanation. Every action has a context that comes before it, that had a bad thing that happened before it that made me react the way it did. What do they have besides Jackson?
It's worth noting that at least one accusation did surface organically. Following Lex's video, a Twitter user named Clancy accused Dawn of grooming. They met Dawn when they were 17 and started dating when they became of age in 2020. They didn't have any screenshots, but were able to provide artwork from Dawn as proof. The post received 3,000 likes, yet strangely went ignored by Lex. It seems odd given the direct thank you and plea to reach out. Well, Clancy explains they first tried to come forward back in 2020. They even link their original Twitlonger, which has this choice excerpt. A couple of days ago, another one of Dawn's exes asked me about my relationship with him. They told me that they were very worried for me and weren't able to reach out to warn me about their experiences with Dawn. We talked over stuff for a couple hours, and I realized the full weight of the situation I was in. After Dawn's other ex and I had processed everything together, I decided to message Dawn one-on-one about the situation and tell him how I felt about everything. I told him that I wanted him to be held accountable for what he had done, and how I was upset that none of his friends, not a single person in his friend server, had asked me about my relationship with him at the time. That ex was none other than Lex, which they only revealed 3 years later. Lex had dated Dawn on and off as far back as 2017. The private matter was an argument they had while broken up. Dawn continued to purchase Lex's adult content while they weren't together. Lex told him to unsubscribe in order to set a boundary, but somehow she ended up sending it all for free.
And I would be like, you mean like the old ones that you're sub to? And he was like, no, like new ones, or like all of them. I didn't want to, but my boundaries were so poor. I said,
yeah anyway. Like at this point we had talked enough that I thought he liked me, so I was trying not to assume poorly of him, because I just genuinely didn't think he would do that, and then he did.
The reason all of this is important is because of the context of when it takes place. If we're to believe their story, Lex helped them realize Don was a groomer, which ultimately led to a call-out post. The only problem is that this twitlonger is from August of 2020, an entire year before the events of Lex's video. That means she spoke to one of Don's alleged victims, helped them process what they went through, and then started dating him anyway. Yeah, it doesn't really make sense. Well, the only way for this to not be true is for one of them to be lying. I'll let you make that judgment for yourself. Lex also doesn't mention that Don and her were polyamorous for several years. In fact, she was at one point living with another boyfriend while Don was in Germany. It may seem like a small omission from her video, but it's context to what their relationship was like. He never met her in person until November of 2021 when the accusations occurred. Lex's claim is that by Creator Clash, she was already planning to break up with him. No one was supposed to know they were dating, which is why it's a shock when Ethan finds out.
On the way back, before we go get a hotel room, Don's like talking to Ethan and like mentions that we're dating. And so after that conversation, he comes over to me and he was like, "You guys are dating?" And my like stomach sank because I was like, I gotta talk to you about this thing.
Lex shows a photo to date this conversation, May 16th. What Lex doesn't show you are these tweets from the literal day before. On May 15th, Don posted 2 real-life photos to Twitter. The first is of him at the beach with the caption, "Found the love." Lex replied, "We don't need to know where the love is anymore. We found it." The second is Don holding Lex in his arms. Lex replied, "Strange woman fresh from the ocean. If you didn't want people to think you were dating this person, why would you let him take, post, and reply to these photos?" Furthermore, all of this occurred way after the apparent incident, and I'm supposed to believe that she hated this guy the entire time while she's posting pictures with him, like holding her? Now finally, as if all of that didn't convince you, I'd like to talk about Cassette Girl. Lex claimed that Don based her as well as half of his characters off her appearance.
It's less so about me, but I just looks like a girl that he would like. Half his OCs look like me. His Cassette Girl character is referenced by me. He like told me this himself.
Don refuted this in his response, stating it was based off a SoundCloud he used to listen to. Now, it doesn't provide any proof of this, so one might be inclined to just believe Lex and not believe him. But you don't even need that because Lex hasn't always looked like that character. This is what she looks like back in 2018, and this is how she drew herself back then. This is early concept art of Cassette Girl for comparison. An obvious disprovable lie that she included with as much confidence as every other claim. I save this example for last because it isn't even a matter of opinion. You can visually see that she is lying. We've so far discussed the credibility of Leighton, Morgan, Rav, and Lex. This leaves us with a key player in her story that has yet to be addressed.
You have the same attitude about fat people. That kind of attitude comes from the same roots as racism. It's the same kind of judgmental, prejudicial attitude.
Ethan is online as Lex's current boyfriend. Lex isn't clear about when their relationship began. It's a clear conflict of interest, given he's also the first person she ever tells about the apparent assault. Her video strangely skips over the month of March entirely, which happens to be the month they met for the first time. Ethan isn't just friends with Nick, but a frequent collaborator.
So you said the people who watch Nick is Not Green. We don't have like as much of an audience overlap as people think, but
you guys work
would
together.
Yeah, of course we do. He's like my best friend. Yeah, we work together all the time. We're releasing an album.
In addition to music, they often work on videos together. That was the case when they learned the first NFT convention was being held in LA. They booked an Airbnb and met up on March 23rd. It was sometime during this visit that Ethan met Lex for the first time in person. On March 30th, Lex posted a photo of herself with "Ethan is online" and "Nick is not green." It's unclear if they had interacted very much before this. Lex is credited in the final video though, as her artwork was used. It seems they did a public casting call for artists, which she responded to. They may have recognized her as they were both massive fans of SuperMega at the time, which you may not even know. Nick asked to be on the podcast in 2021, and Ethan vouched for him in 2022. Ethan in particular tweeted at Matt a lot, praising his music and asking for vinyl. Nick would celebrate and proclaim his love for SuperMega during Creator Clash. Ethan stayed with Lex and Don at the Airbnb. He was the first one she ever told about the assault. Lex then decided to sleep in his room that night instead of Don. She broke up with Don at the end of the trip before returning home. By then, she already had her ticket to go to NorCal with Ethan. She arrived on May 25th and left on June 14th. That means they spent 19 days together and presumably began dating. And on June 11th, Lex bakes a cake for Ethan to celebrate 100,000 subscribers. Now, of course, this is far from anything definitive, but it's hard to trust him as an unbiased source, especially when this simply isn't addressed at all. Ethan took an active role in the drama as early as April of 2023. This is a thread he made after Leighton's original call-out. He refers to Leighton as a friend and alludes to there being other stories. He even implies that Leighton was threatened with legal action. Fans of SuperMega have been harassing my friend Leighton non-stop after he came out detailing one of many disgusting cases of homophobia he and many others witnessed in their office. His is not the only story, and everyone defending them will look very, very stupid very soon. I'm just as disappointed as many other fans, Leighton included, but I refuse to make excuses for racists entitled dipshits who hurt people. If you see people getting quiet right after speaking on things like this, remember how lawyered up YouTubers can be. Because he was so vague, many began to ask him for these stories. That's when he decided to personally accuse SuperMega of saying slurs. He recounts a joke he personally heard in which they replaced Chuck E. Cheese's middle name with the N-word. This Chuck E. Cheese line is something Leighton also relayed on stream almost verbatim 3 months later.
You guys all know the secrets of SuperMega. So here's the thing. When you join SuperMega, you get told that Chuck E. Cheese has a middle name. Everyone was in the office. Every SuperMega member knows the Chuck E. Cheese thing. They all know it. Every fucking one of them. Every one of them. They know about Chuck E. Cheese's middle name. They're like, oh, keep guessing. And like, you know, like I dropped the F slur because I'm like, is it the F slur? And they're like, no, like keep trying. And like, it was so juvenile that finally it comes to me where I'm like, oh no. And I'm like, is it the N-word?
Matt, meanwhile, denied that they used the N-word, but took specific issue with Ethan. He claims they met only a handful of times, and he was always accompanied by Lex.
Shortly after, one of Leighton's best friends, who is Lex's boyfriend, tried to instigate drama on Twitter by lying and saying that he has heard us say the N-word multiple times. In reality, we've only met this individual a handful of times, and it's mostly been at social events and always accompanied by Lex. So to think that we would just casually be dropping the N-word with a hard R in front of not only someone who's a stranger, but also a woman of color, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. He also mentioned the Chuck E. Cheese joke, and I don't think it's a coincidence that a short time before he posted this stuff, Leighton replied to a tweet about SuperMega with a gif of Chuck E. Cheese. Leighton denied that he even knew his friend was going to say anything or that Leighton was involved with this, but I think it's a little too coincidental.
Now, Ethan wasn't the only person that came out in support of Leighton back then. Nick replied to that same thread with this. Sounds like a really cool fan base that constantly defends two white dudes who have a horrible reputation behind closed doors. On August 2nd, 2023, Nick released his follow-up to the SuperMega story. By then, the public's opinion had shifted against the accusers. Leighton had no credibility, which reflected poorly on those who supported him. Lex received backlash, so she disabled comments on her video. Nick clarifies that he isn't friends with Leighton and admits most of his claims were disproven. It was also a mistake to share his story in his video.
I was never once told by Leighton to make a video in any of the situation. I've had zero contact with him. I am not a close friend of Leighton's. I've only hung out with him a couple of times, and it was always in a social setting. This part of the video largely refutes a lot of what Leighton was saying, and I think it resulted in people shifting a lot more of the blame to the victims of this situation rather than the people who caused it in the first place. I don't think he should have said anything in the first place, and I do regret talking about it because it has become this conversation over whether or not Leighton was like the mastermind behind this thing.
The main issue people had with Leighton is that none of his accusations were even relevant to Lex's issues. Lex's criticism of SuperMega is that they mishandled the Dawn situation and made her homeless. Leighton shared details of Matt's relationships without either party's consent. Nick agrees this wasn't necessary, but offers a bizarre defense anyways. He argues that because Matt shares some of his life publicly, everything is fair game. If that take couldn't get any worse, this is specifically in the context of their late friend.
A big part about this video that Matt and Ryan were very upset about is the comments that Leighton made about Daniel and his suicide and the way that Matt and Ryan handle it. Of course, I see how Matt and Ryan would respond to this in a negative way if it's not true, but in the same way, Matt brings up these details about his personal relationship that were brought up in this situation, and it's another thing that he was pretty upset about in terms of people dragging in other people into his life that have nothing to do with this. And although I do think that there were a lot of instances that were unnecessary to bring up about you, in the same way, your life is so connected. I mean, you say it yourself that SuperMega is your magnum opus. It is a part of you. Your personal life is a part of this channel.
Is Nick is Not Green genuinely expecting me and anyone else to believe that any YouTuber who shares even one part of their private life on camera is now subject to endless violations of their privacy and people casting judgment? Imagine if he had said this about an OnlyFans girl, okay? Imagine how his audience would take this. Well, keep that in mind if they ever end up responding to this video. Nick concedes that Matt's girlfriend shouldn't be part of the story and that he regrets talking about her. He even refrains from saying her name. This is undermined seconds later when he shows her name on screen and justifies her relevance.
I'm not gonna say her name, and I regret bringing her up initially, but I do think that these stories actually give us necessary context to how SuperMega was handling this controversy behind closed doors before it happened.
Nick then offers his own interpretation of the leaked screenshots that Ethan shared on Twitter.
Overall, you can tell that she is not happy about it, and I can come to a conclusion about how Matt feels about it. But that is all stuff that was behind closed doors. We don't have any proof for that. I feel like when a former friend of yours comes forward about sexual assault that happened under your home, behind closed doors, you shouldn't be saying that Matt's going to be debunking everything and that he's going to prove everyone wrong. We're all going to feel like fucking idiots. I think that's pretty necessary context that your own girlfriend is calling all the people who believe in this girl's story dumb as shit because you're here to like disprove it all.
Nick is conflating her anger here to mean she's talking about Matt disproving the sexual assault claim against Dawn. Nick, do you really think that's what she's talking about when she's talking about debunking everything? Zeph was dragged into the situation and was specifically mentioned in their lies about Matt's life. Is that really more likely to you than the situation personally relevant to Zeph, instead of, you know, the speculation that Matt has to spend time in his video to debunk? If you agree that they were treated unfairly, then I don't understand why it's surprising that they're upset. That's why his video is truly so bizarre.
I do think that Matt and Ryan own up to a lot of the truly awful they did, and I think that was good. A lot of the receipts they brought to the table make it easier to understand where they're coming from, while also understanding that this was handled very poorly and most people in their shoes would have handled it much differently.
He makes a number of concessions, seemingly because the public is demanding him to do so, but won't actually admit that he did anything wrong in regards to Matt and Ryan. In spite of admitting fault and walking back his first video for an hour, Nick continues to spread already disproven claims. For example, claiming Lex wasn't able to get into the Plex for multiple days.
And this is another instance where I think a lot of people start to go, well, you know, they're just human, they're busy, they can't really figure out what's going on, but it still doesn't address the multiple days of communication that Lex didn't have with the guys when she needed to get into the place.
He exaggerates the story by claiming Lex and Rav only stayed for a few days.
Now we have all these comments from people online saying that Lex and Rav were just taking SuperMega for granted and they should have been happy that they could have stayed there those few days that they did.
It's clear that the neutral tone he gives is only for optical reasons, as he later characterizes Matt and Ryan's response as them agreeing they did horrible shit.
But people keep forgetting that they are agreeing that they did all this horrible shit. And just because they agreed that they did it because there was proof that they did it, that doesn't mean that suddenly everyone was lying about everything.
The reason much of that backlash extended to Lex is because she tied herself closely to Leighton. Many claims on his stream first appear in her video, such as the cheating and their comments about Daniel. Lex continued to defend Leighton after the fact and even said she encouraged him to come forward. Lex made the link herself, and it's obvious by now there was some concerted effort to speak out at the same time. Like, they definitely talked about this behind the scenes beforehand. Nick refutes this and the insinuation that Leighton influenced Lex and Morgan to speak out.
It has become this conversation over whether or not Leighton was like the mastermind behind this thing, and insinuating that both of the women in this story are coming forward only because they're friends of this guy who hates them.
He argues that you can't believe this and support Lex at the same time, as it implies she exaggerated her feelings towards SuperMega.
I very well think that Leighton could have convinced Lex and given her the courage to step up and say something, but I definitely don't think that everything was good between Lex and SuperMega, and then once she became friends with Leighton, all of a sudden she has 2.5 hours worth of stories about how they made her uncomfortable and how they treated her. I mean, I don't think he can support Lex's story and really make this claim at the same time, because in order for this to be true, it would have to mean that Lex made up or exaggerated the way she felt about SuperMega and their way of handling the situation. According to them, she was very valid in most of the points that she made.
He says the same about Ethan's claim he heard them say the N-word. Keep in mind, this is not something Lex claims in either her video or the Twitter post.
Matt even brings up tweets from Ethan claiming that SuperMega would say slurs behind closed doors, and claimed that Ethan has really only been with them a few times and that Lex is a person of color and why would they use slurs around around her, but I don't really see why in a story that you otherwise think is true, Lex would suddenly lie about these things that are very serious.
He also questions why it matters that Lex corroborated and defended the credibility of a proven liar.
But as he talks about the role that Layden plays in this whole thing, I don't understand why his actions have to discredit the original story. Lex even said publicly that she was upset about the way Layden handled the story, and she was not under the impression that her story was going to cause him to say everything he did. None of those mistakes should have fallen on Lex. Why would Lex go out of her way to risk her career with thousands of people harassing her for, again, SuperMega's merch designer guy?
We don't have to speculate on a reason for why Nick is being inconsistent. He admits that all of his coverage with the story is motivated by personal bias. I think that's wrong. I think that he did something wrong here. I think that's wrong. I think that's irresponsible, and I don't really care about what he has to say about basically anything past this point. He flat out dismisses the idea of asking for proof and states he only made the video because he's friends with Lex.
This isn't a question of whether or not they didn't know her intentions or whether or not everything was as serious as it was. This is a personal thing that is happening to friends of yours. This isn't like something on paper where you have to like figure out how to find like physical proof that something happened. I thought I made this clear before, but of course I'm gonna take the side of a personal friend of mine when she comes out with a story about her own sexual assault. This isn't like an online like normal thing where I look at all the facts and I make a decision. No, my friend was assaulted and never felt like she was able to be heard, and obviously I believe her word.
The sheer level of personal bias in this video is extremely irresponsible. That much is clear when you look at how he discusses Jim's response in that same video. So earlier I mentioned that Jim posted a video claiming the kiss was consensual. The video was also made to address a different claim by Layton that he was aroused by Lex's SA story with Dawn. Jim explains this was false and quite triggering as he's been victimized himself.
In college, at a party, I was raped by a man. That's something that will sit with me for the rest of my life. If I ever made Lex feel a tiny bit like how I felt that morning after, I'm never gonna, I won't ever forgive myself.
Nick acknowledges its relevance, but still blames him for including it in the video.
Now, I don't think this is something Layden knew about, so I don't think it's necessary to bring this up in a scenario where you're specifically apologizing about something you did to a woman who's not Layden. I do think that, you know, the way Layden handled that specific instance was out of hand. I do think that he should have handled that completely separate from this apology.
He then reads mean comments, calls Jim self-centered, and implies he's faking his tears.
Jim's too much of a coward to keep this up himself. Very sorry I got caught energy. There were also moments where Jim was, I guess, crying in the video, or like trying to seem like he's crying, but it was, I don't know, it's very odd.
He straight up dismisses a clip of Jim denying it was SA and stating the kiss was consensual.
I distinctly remember saying, how hard is it to ask for consent? All you have to do is say, can I have a kiss? And then I said, can I have a kiss? And she said, yes, but it doesn't fucking matter.
Correct. I just thought that was kind of mainly what we needed to hear.
This leads into the main point Nick repeats throughout his video, which is that Matt and Ryan had some responsibility in their supposed homelessness. I've already discussed all of that at length at this point, but for the sake of argument, let's assume that Lex and Rav were actually homeless and not fake homeless. Nick makes sure to downplay Lex's culpability again by claiming she never said SuperMega made her homeless.
I don't know if we remember the story in Lex's video, because suddenly people are saying that she tried to claim that SuperMega made her homeless or whatever. But no, Lex trusted a friend of hers, a close friend of hers that she trusted to take her situation in a way that was serious and took action, like a person who actually runs a business with a bunch of their f***ing friends.
He then argues it was SuperMega's responsibility to house them, as they often hired friends.
And it also doesn't address the fact that these are real friends of yours who are in your city and desperately need help. Matt and Ryan can even say themselves that they're human, they make mistakes, these things are all miscommunication. But then when it comes to people actually living in their house and needing shelter who they consider to be close friends, people are kind of treating it like this black and white situation where you can't let someone live in your space even though everyone says it's completely trashed and it smells disgusting. If your office is a place that is holding friends of yours and people are living out of that space, then yeah, it's personal. They're your friends. We don't deal with it like a work matter just because it happened in a fucking building that was where you were.
They agreed to let people crash, not for people to live there. Matt and Ryan only agreed to let people stay at the Plex temporarily. We've seen that through text evidence from both parties. Lex and Rav not respecting this agreement is them taking advantage of a friend's generosity. There's also no reason to think they're lying when they said it became a work issue. If 5 other people use the space and it impedes their work, how is that not affecting their business? It doesn't matter if they're also friends, they're employees. Lex and Rav are not. Matt and Ryan provided far more than what they had to, and what they had to provide is nothing. That's also ignoring Matt's offer to help Lex get an apartment. In spite of this, Nick goes further to state that they don't deserve their business.
If you have too much going on and you can't take care of that, you need to hire someone who can, or else you don't deserve your business. You don't know how to handle it.
This is one of several strangely personal attacks against Matt. It feels rather spiteful. Considering Nick is a former fan of theirs, it almost feels like a disgruntled ex-fan airing out his grievance or something. I don't even know what he's doing here.
I know it's easy to just throw shit up when your channel's not doing great and you only really want to post American Truck Simulator Let's Plays, but I have a real job with a real schedule that I keep up for my audience, and I don't make videos for personal vendettas. I don't see how in this situation I am possibly capitalizing off of a victim's story.
Near the end of the video, Nick brings up a claim that he says Matt and Ryan never addressed.
One of the bigger texts that Lex showed where she asked Matt about Don claiming that SuperMega fired him without much of a reason, only to receive a text from Matt that didn't seem worried. He just said, "Be gone, foul beast," even though one of their ex-employees was lying to people about why he was fired and still talking to fans about it. They don't even touch on the fact that Ryan liked art from Don after they fired him on Twitter, and Don tweeted out asking people for a place to stay when none of SuperMega's fans knew that he sexually assaulted someone else.
However, in editing, Nick realized a far simpler explanation. They didn't tell Don why he was fired.
And it could really only either be Don lying to people about this so he doesn't have to admit what he did, or maybe the talk he had with SuperMega was confusing and vague to him. But we really never got any response about that.
Nick uses this to argue that Matt and Ryan covered up the essay. He argues that they should have ignored Lex's wishes to keep the story private, as Don was an active threat to others. He argues that they should ignore the victim's wishes to not tell the story, which would obviously traumatize her. That is insane.
I'm all for keeping Lex's story private if she wants it to be private, but there's gotta be a way to tell your fans in a safe way that Don is not someone who they should follow anymore, that he was let go for a reason that you can't talk about, but you need them to know that it's serious and that they shouldn't really engage with him anymore. It's hard for me to completely understand where they're coming from when they say they weren't trying to cover up sexual assault, especially because 2 close friends of theirs, Justin and Kelly, both removed SuperMega from their Twitter bios, and according to Lex, it was after they found out about Don's situation.
To demonstrate this, he points out everyone was told about the Jackson Tucker situation immediately, which, just for a little bit of extra context, if you forgot, Jackson Tucker is an ex-employee who racked up 60 grand in credit card debt, and they then had to sue him to get that money back.
I struggle to understand how someone as close to them like Justin wouldn't know about someone in the SuperMega offices being a assaulter, especially because Justin knew Don. In the other case, if you knew about SuperMega's controversy with another former employee of them by the name of Jackson, Lex says in her video that she knew all about the Jackson situation. She was with Matt when it happened, and it seems like their whole office was aware of that.
Nick is not green on the Green is not Nick channel. A little confusing, I know. They're trying to compare Lex's situation to Jackson Tucker. I mean, on his face, that is so ridiculous. Is there anything about anyone's reaction to those 2 situations that would be the same? I think it's a little easier to tell someone you got defrauded than that you got SA'd, sexually assaulted, okay? If they were asked to keep it private, then I guess Nick is advocating for them to disrespect her wishes and gossip about it against her will. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, buddy. Nick's second video received 400,000 views, but had pretty mixed reception, even among his own audience. The comments are filled with people criticizing him, like he dead found a way to make this about him while walking back his last video for an hour. They rightfully pointed out that Nick felt more focused on his own feelings than the actual situation at hand. Nick's subreddit also turned against him, with many suggesting that he delete his videos. Even with the concessions, they both remain public to this day. That finally takes us to the aftermath. I personally began talking about the situation a few weeks later. I uploaded 2 videos critical of Nick's coverage to my second channel, Tom Dark. One of those was with streamer Destiny, who also took issue with his callousness. This led many to realize the situation was far different than what they'd initially believed. Nick has so far given 2 responses that fail to take any accountability. The first one came from his story on Instagram. A certain Debate Bros fan base has had their aims on me for a few weeks. They will move on to their next target in a month. Genuinely the most mindless zombies you'll find on the internet. The second is an offhand remark at the start of one of his videos.
There's too many Reddit debate bro dorks on this website trying to come after me every single day. So I thought I'd show them a little bit of what I'm made of. You know, do I look scary?
Nick, you personally contributed probably the worst to overshadowing Lex's story. You created the most viewed video on the subject, which spends a significant portion on Leighton's story. Not only that, but you often misstate info from Lex's own video that makes me question if you even watched it. This callous approach to such a serious matter is as careless as it is irresponsible. Nick justifies this because he's Lex's friend. He's more easily inclined to believe her. The problem isn't that by itself. You can believe your friend, but there's an entirely different standard when you decide to publish those accusations to your YouTube channel with 700,000 subscribers. Even from his first video, Nick uncritically read a bunch of random accusations from Reddit and treated them as fact. Aside from whatever jokes I can make about uncritically repeating Reddit stuff after calling Destiny a Reddit debate bro, and I guess me by extension, I'm a Reddit debate bro, Nick to this day has refused to acknowledge any wrongdoing. Instead, he would rather downplay everything, and while he does kind of call out Leighton a little bit, he refuses to accept that he actually did anything wrong. Keep in mind, Leighton is a proven liar, and he fails to condemn him really whatsoever. He says, oh, maybe he went a little hard. No, he lied. We have the proof. Everyone watching this just watched it, okay? Shortly after my initial coverage, Lex would end up unlisting her video and updating the description. She distances herself from Leighton completely, but never actually says his name. It also doesn't help that I've had an individual around me who has made this worse for me by taking my trust in them for granted by using it as a platform to say a lot of really not okay things while I was out seeing a movie. I would have never talked if I knew something like that would happen because it has seriously made me regret saying anything despite the relief I felt prior. That appeared to be the end of the story and was where this video was originally going to leave off. But just a few days before I was planning to release on October 17th, Ryan posted a new statement on the matter, this time on the offense. It's directed against Leighton, Nick, Lex, and Ethan. Ryan was upset that those involved still hadn't taken responsibility for bringing up Daniel Kyer. He reiterates the accusation that they didn't care about him was not true. He takes time to reflect on how close of a friend Daniel was and how deeply his loss affected everyone around him. It was a traumatic event that, thanks to Lex, was now being exploited for internet brownie points. He lists specific instances and even points out Lex was the first person to mention him. The claims regarding Matt and I disrespecting Daniel's memory were made and propagated by Lex in her now unlisted YouTube video that was posted July 27th, 2023, where she claims Matt called Daniel a coward multiple times and that Matt and I don't give a shit about suicide. She was the first person to mention Daniel. Leighton Stollard in a now deleted Twitch livestream that aired July 28th, 2023, where he stated we would make the actual act of Daniel's side the punchline of disgusting jokes. Nick, in a video that was uploaded to his YouTube channel on July 29th, 2023, where he uses a random post from a fan on the SuperMega subreddit as a segue to talk about Daniel, while also highlighting the claims Leighton and Lex made. And lastly, Ethan in a now deleted YouTube livestream that aired July 30th, 2023, in which Lex also appears, where he confidently states that we called Daniel a coward as he's reading a SuperMega apology bingo card on the SuperMega subreddit. This is the same stream where Ethan displays a subscriber counter for our channel, celebrating the loss of our audience while encouraging those watching to unsubscribe from SuperMega. Ryan goes on to explain what transpired after they released their responses. Ethan and Leighton went quiet. Lex defended Leighton, citing his BPD. Then, a few weeks later, she unlisted her original video with a new description to distance herself. Ryan calls us out for what it is, throwing Leighton under the bus. Within this edit, she states that an individual, Leighton, used her trust in them as a platform to say a lot of really not okay things. She throws Leighton under the bus while failing to take accountability for how she said some of those exact same things, and was the first one to do so. They don't care about suicide. They don't give a shit about suicide. Those are her exact words after repeating Daniel's name to the camera twice. Her only proof that I didn't care being that I was quiet or uncomfortable around discussions pertaining to the topic. She never apologizes for unnecessarily bringing Daniel into the conversation. He points out that her edited description doesn't even acknowledge the mistake. The only thing I could find was in the edited description where she says, my intention was to get my message about Don immediately completed and believed, and talk about what happened after that unfortunately led me to see him again, which is what led to a lot of interpersonal chaos chaos that I learned wasn't necessarily explaining in detail or even at all to be believed. Whatever she may have meant by this, it doesn't do anything to clear the water she muddied in relation to Daniel, especially when it's an edit to a description of an unlisted video. Neither did the words of Nick, who also didn't take any responsibility for propagating the lie. Nick was and still is the only one of them to publicly address things after the release of our videos. In Nick's update, he doesn't take responsibility for how wrong it was to specifically use Daniel in his original video, which garnered over 700,000 views. He instead dedicates about 20 seconds of his 1 hour and 5-minute upload to say he thinks he made a bit of a mistake when including other stories, mentioning how he believed it was context that he personally thought was important and necessary for the story. What logical leap must one make to think my friend who has been gone for over 8 years is in any way context to Lex's story of SA? Nick gave a spotlight to the things said about Daniel not because he thought it added context to the story, but because it helped his thesis of SuperMega is filled with horrible people. This was intentional hurt smuggled in under the guise of providing context. When you shoot and edit a video, you get to choose what you want to keep in and what you want to leave out. You have full control over what you say. So why was Daniel edited in? Why bring him into this and perpetuate that I was indifferent when I have not once opened up about Daniel to any of these people? From this point on, I'll be reading the rest of the post verbatim, as I don't think there's any additional commentary required. It's a very well-written, interesting post. Nick, Lex, Layton, and Ethan weaponized my best friend's death against me, the person who found him. As a result, there have been comments perpetuating these lies on a video where I'm commemorating Daniel on our old channel, Syndigo, accusing my grief of being fake. Additionally, Daniel's social media posts have been targeted as well. Daniel is no longer with us, therefore doesn't have a voice to speak up. He can't mute, block, or delete harassing and hurtful comments. This situation has tainted his online memorial for me as people comment as if they knew our friendship based solely on the lies perpetuated by individuals that never even knew him. What was once a time capsule of my best friend that I could look back on has now become a place that fills me with anxiety. I can't simply scroll through new comments and see people remembering him without also seeing these baseless accusations mixed in. It's just disrespectful. If anyone has anything to say, I wish they wouldn't do so by marring the social media pages of someone who can no longer speak for themselves. In relation to the old jokes told about Daniel, humor is how I and many others handle trauma. It gives us some sort of control over it. Any jokes told are in the vein of pretending to forget how to pronounce Syndigo or jokingly lamenting how 7-Second Challenge featuring Markiplier Part 2 never came out. All this to say that unless someone wanted to personally misconstrue times I've brought Daniel up, there's never been a moment I or Matt have expressed callous ambivalence to his death. I'm not asking for these people to be harassed or bullied. I only ask them for what they asked of Matt and me, to take accountability. Needlessly bringing Daniel into a conversation that had nothing to do with him, only to use him as a malicious tool, is low. None of these people cared about Daniel. They only cared about what damage they could cause to his name. The whole reason this situation began was because traumas weren't felt to have been taken seriously, and now I'm left confused and angered that this same group of people would then deliberately attack my most sensitive trauma and use my friend to smear both Matt and I. It's easy for them to spread the sentiment they didn't care about Daniel, a my word versus their word spun out of thin air, but they didn't have to endure the actual hardships that came with Daniel's passing. They weren't the ones who found him. They weren't the ones who waited in purgatory at the hospital. They weren't a part of the community that grieved his loss and continues to celebrate his life. There's an entire history that they get to neglect for the benefit of adding poison to the well. Daniel was an amazingly talented dude with skill sets far beyond his years. He was more than just a talent to so many people because on top of his accomplishments stood a creatively funny, contemplative, and unique friend. I remember many nights where Daniel would throw coins at my bedroom window until he got my attention so we could go on late night drives to smoke cigarettes and belt out whatever song we felt like singing while booking it down a barren South Carolina highway. I will forever miss Daniel being in my passenger seat. Thank you to everyone who took the time to read this regardless of where you stand. I feel like I had to at least say something since these statements haven't been retracted and continue to cause harm. Large platforms are used to spread this misinformation, and unfortunately some of the sentiments left behind are written in ink. Following this pretty long and detailed post, many thought Nick, Ethan, Lex, or just anyone would reach out and apologize for ever invoking the name of Daniel Kyer. Instead, what they got was this very thoughtful and respectful post from Nick is Not Green on Instagram where he said the following: people will do/say anything to defend people who cover up rape and continue to be friends with rapists. I think I've probably done enough today to show that that straight up did not happen. Just food for thought before you mindlessly and endlessly fight for someone you don't know. Sometimes you wonder why people don't stand up for and stay quiet about victims, and it's because it results in thousands of people calling them liars and harassing them off the internet for any reason they can find. It happens every single time. You guys should shut up and think about why none of their friends and peers stand up for them or back them up. It's worth noting that as of Ryan's new post, many creators have come out to express support in his replies. Not a huge deal, but just saying. It's embarrassing. Go get a job and stop being obsessed with losers. Bro, Nick, directly for you. We're YouTubers, dude. Chill out. I don't even need to say anything, really. This post really speaks for itself. I find it absurd, and obviously this guy is not going to acknowledge what he did here. I think it's fair to say this entire situation was grossly mishandled. Lex's outright lies in her own video poisoned the well, and if her initial story about Dom was true, it is severely discredited by the various falsehoods she spread. These falsehoods were supported by her boyfriend, Ethan is online, their friend, Nick is not green, their other friend, Leighton Stollard, Morg Pie, and even Rav. All of these people spread provable lies to smear SuperMega as a brand while taking away from the one story that they claim to care about at all. Why? I don't fucking know. I just watched it happen, and now I guess so did you. Bye.